Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends, and the foes out there, and welcome to this very special episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind all the avid podcast listeners that you can find this show on the Five Pillars YouTube channel. Perhaps like the Nick Griffin podcast, it may be on Rumble. We don't know yet. If you're listening via all the major audio platforms, you can find it on Apple, Google, Spotify, and everywhere else. Today's guest is indeed a very interesting one. I'm out here in Belfast. I flew out upon invitation to speak to today's guest, who is indeed an infamous figure. Someone who was described by The Times newspaper as the invisible man behind Britain's far right. He was described by the BBC as the ideological guru behind Britain First. He is a minister. He is a Scotsman based in Belfast with a very interesting history, one that will no doubt ruffle some feathers on both the Muslim and non-Muslim side, and that's none other than Jim Dowson.
How are you, sir?
Jim, thank you for hosting me.
You're welcome. You're very well.
How are things?
Well, apart from being up all night with a storm, but this is Northern Ireland and the weather here is notorious.
Tell us a bit about the building that we're filming right now.
The building we're in now is the chapter house of the St. Donard, who's a 5th century monk, a convert to St. Patrick, so it's named after him. This is the chapter house of the Priory of St. Donard, which is a Knights Templar Priory. We have several of them across the world. This is the one for Ireland. We don't want to get into Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland. This is for Ireland, which is, because I don't run the thing, there's a council of 9 that run it. So this is Ireland, which is some of the more northern people like me. But anyway, and we have the church next door, which is the Church of St. Mary Magdalene, which is dedicated to the unborn child and the Christian martyrs, which is a prayer chapel. It's not open to the public. It is. Individuals can come in and pray from the town and the surrounding areas. Sure. And we don't care if they're Catholic, Protestant or Orthodox, as long as they're people of goodwill, good intention. So this is our little chapter house.
How old is this building?
Originally, this building was built in the 1620s when the Scots pitched up. And all the stones from here were taken from the Abbey, which was one of the biggest in Ireland, which was in the village square. Built by the Cistercians from the same monastery of St. Bernard of Clairvaux, who founded the Knights Templar. He built the monastery here. The English king dissolved it. And in 1572, the local Irish chieftain burnt it down because the English wanted tax on it, even though it wasn't old. So he burned it down. And then the Scots came, and as a priest at the time said, we're most industrious people. We wouldn't know the place had ever existed. We took all the stones and built this lovely town, including this. All these stones here come from the monastery.
It is indeed. It gives a very rustic, medieval kind of feel to it, most certainly.
That was the whole idea, because we don't like modernity.
No?
No.
Are there any aspects of modernity that you like?
I'm sure if I thought long and hard about it, there probably is, but I can't think of any offhand.
If any come to mind.
If I could flip a switch and go back 250 years, I would. With all the problems that would entail.
Let me kick off today's podcast with some warm-up questions.
Well, let me just tell you a wee funny thing there.
Go on.
Talk about time. The Roman Catholics in this town say, people like me, the Protestants, with haircuts from the 1960s and a mindset from the 1690s.
Swap the numbers around, yeah? 1960s and 1690s.
There's a bad truth in it.
Yeah. I'm going to mention 5 things which are impermissible in Islam, but permissible in Christianity.
Okay.
I just want to get your initial thoughts on these 5 things. Alcohol.
Yep. Well, in Northern Ireland, most Protestant Christians here are ferociously against alcohol. It's not biblical. It's based on American fundamentalism. We came here in the 60s. And it just doesn't make sense. The Bible is quite clear. Alcohol is not permitted. Alcohol is not forbidden. It's as simple as that. So if it's not forbidden, and we read about the Last Supper, or even our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, partaking wine and bread, and people would say it's not real wine. Of course it was real wine. That's why Paul warned not to be getting drunk in communion. So obviously it's real wine. So no, the Bible doesn't forbid it. I don't have a problem with alcohol. However, I think there must be a big caveat. Alcohol is very dangerous. And you know, alcohol comes from the Arabic. Kohol. Exactly, we know it is a demon. Alcohol causes so many problems in society. And a lot of Protestant villages don't have pubs. And if you see the Catholic villages, you can get to a Catholic village where my family originally come from in the south, County Cavan. Population of 2,000 people. Used to be 22 pubs. This is then it becomes a big problem. And the alcohol leads to family breakups, it leads to all sorts of social ills. So I think alcohol is not forbidden by the Bible, but drunkenness is. So I think you have to be extraordinarily careful when you're dealing with alcohol. But the British pub is an institution. It is an institution where people meet. It's not just a pub. Look, there's pubs straight across the road here. You'd very seldom find anybody drunk there. People meet there and for a community and a sense of community and so on and so forth. I think it'd be better if they met in the church hall. So that's my views on alcohol.
You know the process of seeking a spouse, right? In Islam, there is a courting period,
yes,
where you're basically looking at your options available. But there's no real such thing as premarital dating. Does such a thing exist in Christianity?
Used to. Yes, absolutely. My son at the moment is looking for a spouse. He's looking for a woman and he's vetting them. What's their, first of all, are they Christian? What type of Christian? Because there's a huge gambit now. And I would say the majority of people in this country who even say they're Christian, who go to church. I'm not just talking about the ones saying I'm a Christian, like Tommy Robinson. I don't think he even says that. But the people who actually go to church, most of them have no idea what Christianity is all about. None whatsoever. So it's finding out, are they real Christians? Genuine. And then we get through this. We have a courting process, of course. And I know when I was in America, it was like the way I grew up. You can arrange to court a girl, which means you meet up with her, but not alone. There's always an auntie or an uncle.
So that's my next question.
Yeah.
In Islam, we have a concept called mahram. Mahram is the male chaperone that has to be present of the female, right? When she's traveling, when she's pretty much out and about in public, at least that's the rule. Forget about the exception and what's practiced, but the male chaperone or the mahram is something that's still very much part of our tradition. Does such a concept exist in Christianity?
We've lost that. We used to, of course. And I say, again, in America, if you go to the Bible Belts in America, even to this day, because my son was in America looking for a wife, and she couldn't go and meet him without a brother. And they could sit on the couch and talk separated, and the brother would sit over there, or the auntie would sit there. Everything was absolutely, eye contact. And even phone calls monitored. If you wanted to phone them, somebody was on the other line listening. That happens now. It used to happen in this country, especially in Northern Ireland, maybe 40 years ago. It doesn't really happen now. I don't personally believe any woman should be out on their own. Now, I got all my girls married very young. All of them married as teens.
You have 9 children, right?
Well, 4 survives there, but I have them all married young, teenagers.
4 survived because you consider those who passed away as living children,
Of course. And they're buried. They're buried in a special place, of course. But I'm very uncomfortable with women being unchaperoned.
What about dating before spouse?
I don't believe in dating. I think it's wrong. And I see it happens now. Of course it happens. But I don't think it works. Courting's good. Dating, no.
Polygyny is permissible for the Muslim. Many of the prophets of the Bible and the Quran, they had multiple wives. Abraham, Solomon. May peace. May God
I debate this quite regularly with scholars. So I mean, I've got a master's degree in theology. I know. I've got to say, I mean, it says in the Bible, and Christians would use the argument. It says a bishop or an elder has to be the husband of one wife. Why say the husband of one wife? Why have to say it? If it's a fact and it's a reality, why state one wife? What does that mean? So I think Christianity, because, Christianity's been mucked about with a lot, especially under the papacy and things like that. I think there is a very serious argument. Somebody could theologically make in good conscience that this idea of having one wife is a social construct rather than biblical theology. But that is highly controversial, and I've been flung out of some.
Really?
Oh, dear me, I've been asked to leave on many occasions. Now, it's not something I would personally do. Let me tell you, one wife's enough for any man.
At least in this day and age.
Oh, I mean, I look at these Mormons and I think they're crazy. But I think it's a theological question that if you're honest, and I like to think of myself as honest and go to those difficult places, it's a concept that needs looked at.
Do you believe men, by their innate frame, that they are polygynous by nature? Or do you think that we're monogamous by nature? By nature, I mean by the innate
Yes,
disposition.
by natural law. Right? Yeah, I think men for most of their lives are, and I think even the difficulties as we evolved, and I don't believe in evolution as that, but as our societies have evolved,
Of course.
I think it'd be very difficult to be the father and the protector of more than one family group. I think that would be quite difficult. So I think most men have been monogamous, but there are problems. If there's an age gap where a woman becomes infertile and things like that, what do you do? I mean, the idea in the West now would be, well, get rid of her, bring a new one in, and she's cast away.
We wouldn't do that.
No, of course not. So again, it's a difficult, very difficult theological question that needs to be looked at.
Lastly,
I'll get excommunicated after this show.
idols and statues. I ask of you because one of the very first things you showed me when I entered your premises was the picture of the lady holding the rock.
Yes.
Do you have a crucifix with the depiction of Jesus? So what's your views on the cross, the statue?
Commandments.
Idols?
Do not make unto thee any graven images, bow down before them. No. We don't have any. I mean, it's very modern that we have this because obviously this organisation is Catholics and Orthodox.
Yeah.
But with no way, I can't bring myself, because I've got to sit in here most times. That's a plain cross with a lamb on it, which symbolises the Lamb of God. But in most Protestant churches, we don't have a cross. We don't even have crosses. We don't have. This is alien to me. This is alien. This is alien.
So what about the ones with the
Jesus
depiction
on
of
it?
Jesus?
No, I don't like it one bit. But remember, I come from the Protestant position. I think that's horrific. I think it's horrible. Because Jesus isn't on a cross. That's the whole point. He's not on a cross. He's not dead. He's risen from the dead. He reigns in heaven at the right hand of the Father. So he's not on a cross. So why depict him on a cross as a victim? He's not a victim. He's a conqueror. He's a king. So no, I don't like that. I don't like it. And you'll find Protestants don't like that. And it's only in very recent years Protestants would even have any kind of cross in the church at all.
Are you talking specifically in Northern Ireland or?
No, anywhere. In America. I was shocked when I went to America. Baptists, for example, have pictures of Jesus in the wall. What is this? This is horrific. But they do. But America, most bad things come from America. A lot of good things. Most good things start in America. But nearly all the bad things also start there. So they've drifted a bit. But I grew up in an environment, no music in the church. No carpets. Nothing. No music. No organs. No nothing. No hymns. Psalms only. Because that's the Bible. So you're repeating God's words. That's my tradition. Psalms only. No music.
What about gender segregation? Men and women cannot intermingle in gatherings.
No. And my churches, no.
Okay.
And we used to have two doors as well.
Oh.
Where women went in one door.
What's it?
Men went in another door.
doors?
Two doors.
That's the standard for our.
Yeah, our schools were the same. I could take you around here after this interview, I'll show you. We have massive big schools where above the door the time is short, big Presbyterian schools. One door for the girls, one door for the boys, and the classes were separated. I grew up in a separated school. And when I was there, they changed the rules. And the first time ever, classes were mixed. And it was a disaster. Disaster. Because you're a 15-year-old boy. You've got hormones raging through your body. And girls nowadays are not modest. They were a bit more modest back then. I don't know what it'd be like now. Can't imagine. But it distracted us. Because we're looking at these girls. And girls of that age are more mature than men, boys. So they're filling out. And they're for lumps and bumps everywhere. Totally distracted. A disaster.
I want to ask you about 5 isms.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get your initial instinctive thoughts on the following isms. Secularism.
Oh, well, this is why the not just this country, but the world is in the state it's in. Man is created by God. Human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. Period. And when you move from that, well, first of all, it's an intellectually bankrupt position to be a secularist. It's ludicrous. And a lot of it comes from, sadly, my people, the Scots and the Enlightenment area.
The Reformation.
Not the Reformation. No. The Reformation was taking us back to an early religion. But 200 years after the Reformation, we had the Enlightenment, where Masonic influence. By the way, this is another thing. They think the Templars are Masonic. We're nothing to do with them.
But he thinks you. What's the first thing you said to me?
I thought yeah.
But
don't allow Freemasons to
we're
join.
going to get to the nice thing.
Yeah.
But what I want to ask you though is,
But secularism is a ludicrous position.
but the Enlightenment wouldn't have happened without the Reformation.
Well, the Reformation wouldn't have happened if you hadn't had the indulgences. Where do you stop? Nothing would have happened and if the Romans hadn't crucified Jesus Christ at the behest of the Jews. Where do you start? No, the Reformation was a good thing. It had to stop what the church had become, which was awful. I think anybody nowadays, even Roman Catholics, would believe the church was out of control, selling indulgences, really. Ridiculous. And all the richest people in Europe at that time lived within a 10-mile radius of Rome. The biggest villas with the cardinals, the bishops. You had popes that were married. You had the Borgias, the whole shebang. It had to stop. And the Reformation was basically just rejecting that. Remember, we are still Catholics. St. Mark Creed, I believe in the one holy apostolic Catholic Church. Every Protestant says that. We are the true Catholic Church, which means universal, the body of believers, the ecclesia. It's not a denomination. It's the bride of Christ. Not Presbyterianism, not Baptists, not Roman Catholics. So, they're Romanists because they follow the teachings of Rome. A lot of them are rejecting it. I see the popes now saying you can bless homosexual marriages. We knew all this 500 years ago. That's why we rejected the pontiff system. So, I don't believe you can really blame this. The Reformation was a great thing. It reset the clock. Sadly, human beings will always go off the beam. Always. And then we had the whole Enlightenment, which could be an amazing thing because you had the revolution in France. That was very secular, a rejection of the church.
So what's your views on Jean-Jacques Rousseau, J.S. Mill? What's your views on this?
Well, it's funny, Rousseau.
Benedict Spinoza.
What's funny about Rousseau, I remember.
Nietzsche, all these guys.
Oh, Nietzsche, don't talk to me about Nietzsche. But Rousseau, for example, we were doing a protest outside the Chinese embassy because there were forced abortion thing. And this Chinese guy turned up and I watched the Chinese diplomat scream at a big captain or whatever he is, big top policeman, and treat him like a wee boy and tell him shoo us away. And across the road then there was Falun Gong, which is some kind of weird cult in China, and they were on hunger strike and the guy died. And they were trying to shoo us away. We refused to go. And we were faced with armed response team who actually chipped my tooth. The rifle was that close to my face and chipped my tooth. But we still wouldn't go. We got to our knees and we prayed. We wouldn't move. And so I've lost the track there.
We were talking about China.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this was a problem with these people. And we protested there against the Chinese behaviour, against what they were doing, and against their anti-human behaviour, because they're a very secular country. Very, very secular.
Atheistic, godless.
Totally atheistic and godless. So we'd experience of what these people are actually about. And you'll see all the time on the internet, for example, religion's the root of all wars. Really?
Yeah.
Really? Mao Zedong? Yeah. With Pol Pot,
Let's look at
Adolf
the last
Hitler.
100 years, yeah.
Are you crazy? Most people in this world have been butchered by atheists, not by religious people. And a lot of people in the West now would say the Muslims kill everybody. Well, I think you've killed a lot, but nobody's killed as many as Christians over the years, especially the Roman Church.
Why do you think Christianity has succumbed to secularism?
I think there's been a huge...
I know that's a very generic statement.
I know, but there's been a huge effort. You can see it in the 1800s and 1850s to about 1900 in Germany. There was a thing called higher textual criticism in Germany. A lot of that came from the sort of Marx, Engels type early, rebellion against God. And a lot of that was Jewish influence as well. But it crept into the Protestant seminaries where they cast doubt on the Bible. And from a Protestant perspective, once you cast doubt on the Bible, if you can break that trust, it's all gone.
Let me ask you something. It's related to this point. When priests, I'm talking about Catholics, I don't know all the sketches with Protestants, but when there's kind of abstinence and staying away from intimacy and all of the, and same with the nuns. I get the piety, I get the sacrifice. Would you say it's going against, again, our innate disposition
against the Bible? Against the Bible, not minority.
Of wanting to procreate, of wanting to have...
Yeah, Paul says it's better if you're an official in the church and you're a very busy person looking after the flock. It's better if you can not to take a wife, to dedicate yourself to your congregation, your people. But if you must, take one. Better that than to burn. Now, burn in both ways, burn in hell and burn with desire, which will lead you into sin, which will lead you to burn in hell. So Paul states this clearly in the Bible. And as far as I know, and a lot of people don't know this, priests in the Roman Catholic Church, it was common for them to have wives and concubines right up until about the 12th century. Mm-hmm. Then it was something to do with property law and aggravation. They said, right, we'll have to try and stop this. But it was still a common practice right up until probably the Reformation. Mm-hmm. That most priests, most bishops and most cardinals had concubines.
Yeah.
When I grew up in Scotland, most priests had housekeepers. And there was none of this nonsense about interfering with children. It didn't exist. I didn't know any of it because housekeepers were about, you know. Now, you could say that, well, that's a bit wrong. Yeah, of course it is. But I think it was better then than it is now. Because, I mean, it makes me sad, even though I'm not a Roman Catholic, and I'm quite opposed to Roman Catholicism, not Roman Catholics, people like me. But I've watched the Roman Catholic Church collapse 30 years ago in Ireland. 94% of people attended Mass weekly. 94%. In inner city Dublin now, it's 3%. And why? Obviously, a bit of secularisation, but the main reason was the sex crimes. And not just the sex crimes committed against the children, but the way the hierarchy covered up for it. Now, people say, well, your church is just as bad. Really? How many Presbyterians or Baptist ministers have you ever heard they've been up for sex? There are some. I know some. There was a guy a couple of years ago in Belfast. He was a Presbyterian minister, unmarried, and he was a paedophile, and he was interfering with people. He got bailed, and they put him in a house in a Protestant loyalist working class estate. He wasn't even there 24 hours. He was dragged out of the house and beat to death on the street by the people.
You know, an irony that passes my mind is that when I assess how Muslims and non-Muslims / Christians approach relationships, I think there's a poetic irony here. Muslims are allowed polygyny, yet society and the social constructs have forced us to be monogamous. Christians, and I say this because there's those who identify as Christians, those who are culturally Christians, those who are Christian by name, whatever the spectrum is. They are actually supposed to be monogamous, but they actually are polygynous by fornicating.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So here you have the Muslim who's allowed 4 wives if he's able to be just. That's the Quranic caveat. If you're able to be
And
just.
maybe keep sane.
Yeah.
Stay sane.
But we are forced to be monogamous, right? But then you have the non-Muslims who come from Christian heritage or background. They're supposed to be monogamous, and they still give the veneer of believing in monogamous relationship. Yet they have multiple sexual partners. They don't commit to marriage. They don't commit to one woman, and these kind of stuff. So I find it a bit of an irony. We are the polygynous community who are forced to.
It's called having your cake and eat it. And I think everybody, I mean, even me in my young days, because you grow up in this corrupt society, even in my, in earlier times, you can be led astray and you get down the wrong path. And this is why you need strong churches. And this is what's wrong. You said, why are people drifting from the faith? Because what's the point of going to a church when they say, if you go to them, and I've seen this way, infidelity, abortion, you go to the priest or the minister, and they say, what do you think? And we go, well, how do you feel about it? God loves you whatever you do. Just remember that. No, God doesn't love you whatever you do. God hates sin, and if you're committing sin flagrantly and repeatedly, he will hate you and you will burn. Simple as that. And people instinctively know this. So if they go to a church where they're getting told, well, how do you feel? How do you feel about it? God made you that way. With these gay people. And I've ran churches for many, many years, and I've had people come into me and say, well, I am doing this and doing this. But that's the way God made me. And I'm saying, no. You are responsible for you, and you need to stop this. And people will sometimes be furious, but they'll go away and come back and say, I've been around 8 people in the town, eight clergymen in the town, you're the only person who said it was wrong. That's why the churches are dying, because they stand for nothing. They're weak, they stand for nothing. And that's why so many people, especially young women, convert to Islam. I see it.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah.
Because the highest number of converts in Europe are white European women.
I know that.
And that's given the 20 years propaganda of the war on terror.
Yep.
That's the 10 years of propaganda not propaganda in the way they've been framed, of sexual grooming gangs, where perverts, sexual predators, where we have archaic beliefs, we're terrorists, and yet, surprisingly, it is white European women.
I see, and I mean, from a Christian point of view, it horrifies me. I hate to see so many women from our community convert to Islam. I think it's horrific, but it's entirely our fault. There's nothing you guys are doing to persuade them in. The very opposite. The whole world would say, you don't want to hear these people.
We're doing what we have to do.
Exactly.
And that's conveying the message.
It's our fault. Our churches are so weak, so lily-livered. Our Christian men, good grief. I mean, my daughters, thankfully Northern Ireland is so backward. I mean, we still are 100 years behind everybody else. Let's say, this little town here, 10 churches, they're all full. They're all like new extensions going on them. The hardline churches are growing. You can see it later. The hardline churches are growing. There's one built here and there's one built in my village, 4 mile away. Huge churches, all 100 people, and they're filled every day of the week, not just the Sundays. Every day it's something happening. and they're hard-lined fundamentalist Christian churches. The liberal church, there's only two liberal churches in this town, and they're the only two that you can get a seat in on a Sunday, because they're maybe only half full. All the other churches can't get in. If you're not down at 11 o'clock, the door's shut, you ain't getting in. And that's that. And they're strong churches, and they preach a strong message. And that's why we still retain a huge Christian community where things, the behaviour here is much better. If you could walk it. We don't have, for example, this town, no disco. I don't think you call them disco. No clubs. It shows you my age. Disco. We don't have clubs, discos, nightclubs. No, you've got to go about 4 towns away. You've got to go to the coast to find a nightclub. There is none here. There's none in the next town. There's none in the next town. We don't have them.
Is that done intentionally, though?
It's not our thing. We have, everybody's involved with the militias, the Orange and the marching bands and all that stuff. We're all involved with that. And our people, because they're so busy doing that, they're not subject to the Hollywood garbage. And I'll give you an example. Paul Golding was over here once. Paul Golding runs Britain First. He was over here and he said, "I'm going to go to the disco." I says, "I don't do that." But he went to the disco miles and miles and miles away. And he came home early and says, "Weird people." Halfway through the nightclub, and it's all that. Halfway through the night, everyone stops. Country music. Take Me Home, Country Road, West Virginia. In a nightclub. He says he's weird. That's who our people are. So, it's our fault. It's our fault. Not the Muslims' fault. The women are converting to Islam. It's because our people are so weak and they make me sick. I'm on Twitter all the time. I don't debate with people now unless they use their real name. If you have not got the testicles, the moral courage to say what you mean and mean what you say in your own name and stand over it like a proper man,
Agreed.
Don't come on and talk nonsense.
Agreed.
I just want to deal with you.
The next ism, and it's actually linked to secularism, liberalism.
Oh, you may have guessed. I'm not a liberal.
But what's your views on this kind of utilitarian approach to maximising benefits as long as you're not infringing on someone else's?
No, it's a curse. It's a falsehood. It's a fraud. It's a falsehood. Because liberalism is not liberal, right? Remember, Theresa May stood up in the House of Commons and mentioned me personally by name and said, "Jim Dowson's a dangerous man."
She did.
And took us off the second biggest social media platform. We had the second biggest Christian Facebook in the world, only beaten by the Roman Catholic Church. And we were reaching loads of people. We weren't preaching violence. We weren't preaching hatred. It was a fairly fundamentalist Christian message. And overnight we were gone. We had to shut offices across the world because that was a financial thing. We couldn't pay people. And this was done in the name of liberalism. Now we've got Nick Clegg. He's the same. He's a liberal, but liberals are never liberal. They're tyrannical. And I want to tell you something from a Muslim point of view that you should be aware of. I remember years ago we got a phone call saying these wretched Muslims have got the St. George flag taken down for the town hall in some little Cotswold village. And I said, doesn't sound right. So I phoned the nearest mosque, which was about 10 or 15 miles away. I says, "Have you been complaining about that George flag?" And he says, "No, don't talk about it." He said, "We're getting inundated. Nothing to do with us." He said, the man said, "I have been up the council and said to them, put the flag back up. It doesn't bother us."
Shall I tell you what?
And do you know who done it? A liberal woman council leader. She was a middle-aged woman.
Shall I tell you something? One of the things I have an issue with liberals is that sometimes, I don't know whether they do it purposely or whether they do it to stoke further tensions. It could be both. Muslims are not after exceptionalist behaviour, treatment. We just want equal treatment. Meaning if a Hindu, a Sikh, a Jew or a Christian can have a stall to evangelise their faith, we want the same. If they're allowed to worship and build their temples and synagogues and churches, we want the same. And what liberals do is banning Christmas, banning this flag, banning this. Muslims are not offended by this. So when liberals go and start doing this on our behalf, because sensitivities might be, it looks bad.
I know. This is what I'm saying to you. The amount of times I've went to council and said, "Who's took this flag down?" It's nothing to do with Muslims. It'll be a middle-aged, middle-class, heathen, atheistic, stupid woman. Now, you've got the situation now in Britain where Muslims can go out in the street and street preach. But you must have seen it yourself. How many Christians have been arrested for reading the Bible out constantly? They'll arrest the Christians, but they won't arrest the Muslim. They'll think, "Oh, we don't want to touch that." And their sense of liberal identity. "Oh, these are our guests, we must be kind to them. But these are troublemakers." I've had it. I've been battered with bans, police bans, for being on my knees, reciting silently the Lord's Prayer, not even out loud, the Lord's Prayer outside the abortion clinic, on my knees, and the policeman's battered me with a bat and twisted my arms, done all those locks, and dragged me off, threw me in the cell.
Let me ask you this, though. Those Muslims who are in their dawah stalls, so the stalls where you invite and you convey, compared to the Christians who I have seen have been arrested, it can be argued that those Christians who have tried proselytizing their faith in public cite those verses that can be seen as incitement, whereas the Muslims, when we're giving dawah, the verses that are going to come to us to recite to the people isn't going to be the ones about jihad or fighting the kuffar or fighting the disbelievers. So every time I've seen a Christian preacher get arrested, it's because they've cited a verse of the Bible, which for whatever reason the police have seen as incitement. Let me give you an example. If I went in public and I started reciting some of the verses of the Quran with regards to war, specifically about war and stuff like this, I think I'd be arrested.
Well, it's very difficult with the Bible because what do you preach? If you preach to turn away from your sin, the first thing somebody will say to you in the street, I've done it, I've been there, I'm a street preacher by nature. But so what do you mean by sin? Say, are you married to that woman? No, you're living in sin. You know, if you had an abortion, yeah, I support abortion. That's a sin. That's enough, you'll be arrested.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Totally. And again, you get to Romans 1 and you read out men lying with men, women lying with women, giving up their natural use and giving themselves over to lust one another. You're gone. You're gone. So there's very little in the Bible you could actually preach because the big thing is rejecting your sin. Everybody's up so far up their neck in sin. What do you start with? Do you start with homosexuality, abortion, trans? You know, the minute you mention sin, that's it. You're open to arrest.
Nationalism.
Interesting thing. Very interesting thing. Because nationalism is a strange thing. You were talking about earlier about Nietzsche. I despise Nietzsche. And what I find, Nietzsche preaches the Superman principle, yeah? Uh-huh. And all the nationalists, all the white nationalists, that's their God.
Yep.
And literally, that is their God.
Yep.
Although Nietzsche drove himself mad because his father was a minister. Uh-huh. And the reason he really went mad, don't listen to his sister's ramblings, but the reason he went mad is after all that exploring and intellectual rigour, he realised his father was probably right and he was back to where he started and there was a God and he wasn't very well pleased with him. And that's why it lost his mind.
That was the case with many of the thinkers of the time.
Of course.
They came from devout Christian family.
And they go back to the beginning at the end and then lose their mind because they cannot accept the reality. But nationalism, so there's different types of nationalism and you've got to be careful with this. But, you know, I grew up in a very, very volatile world in the 1970s with the Troubles here, and there was the National Front. I was thrown out of college for putting stickers on all the clocks in the college, hang IRA murders. And that brand of nationalism, I didn't know much about it. You know, a kid, you don't know. But I come from a very strong tribe. Even in Scotland, I'm an Ulster Scot. Central Scotland isn't Scottish. Everybody from Central Scotland's from the island of Ireland, either Catholic or Protestant. So we're not really Scottish. And the Highlanders think we're all Irish. And they're right. And so when I went to London, I was sent down by paramilitary loyalists in Glasgow to go to London to teach the National Front how to put together a band. A couple of me and a couple of guys, because we have 1,000 military martial bands here, militant militia bands. 1,000, can you imagine, in this tiny country? So all my sons, all my daughters, all my grandsons, they're in these things. So I went down to teach them, and that's when I became exposed for the first time to this, what I call fake nationalism. I was a nationalist without knowing it, highly tribal without knowing it. When I went there, I found all these different white guys who were idolising Nietzsche. I'd never heard of this guy, Nietzsche. Looked into it. He's preaching a strongman thing, you know, the Superman thing. Uh-huh. Nietzsche was a small, skinny, humpy-backed, pox-ridden failure in life. Uh-huh. And I have never met a 6'2" handsome big guy who was a Nietzschean. The only Nietzscheans I meet are little weasels. Anyway, when I went down there, it was the same. All of these NF guys, they were always shouting and bawling about nationalism. But who was their hero? What songs did they sing? Nazi stuff. Mm-hmm. My father fought the Nazis. My father was a tank driver. My uncle was seriously injured in Burma. My other great uncle was killed in Singapore, the fall of Singapore with the Japs. This to me was astonishing and incredible. How can you be a British nationalist if you're basically backing the Nazis? All the songs, you don't know any patriotic. I know, but by the time I was 10, I knew hundreds of Protestant loyalist British songs. They knew nothing, but they could sing the horse vessel lead and all this nonsense. And I found this bizarre. So that's when I seen nationalism. So that type of nationalism, I reject. Nations were given to us by God. The Bible's clear on it. The Bible is clear. Each people have got their nations, and we should protect our nations. And we should be nice to people who visit and our neighbours. And the Bible's clear. If you come into the old nations, you're to live there for 7 generations without a blot, with no hassle, before you could be afforded proper citizenship. I don't think that's such a bad principle.
Where's that from?
It's a difficult concept. It's a thread that runs through the Old Testament. I can give you the chapter and verse later, but I couldn't recall it. But it's in there that the new people coming in have got to be there for a long period, probably 7 generations of being not problematic, no issues, no big issues. Then, by that time, they've shown themselves that they're
proven themselves.
So
it takes 7 generations to prove themselves.
Yeah, it's a long time. But maybe not then, because I think a generation is, 20 years?
Yeah.
It's 100 now. It's 100 years.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's such a bad thing. But we should be encouraged to stick with our own nations, because from a Christian perspective, God has given us the nations. Now, there's a thing called British Israelism, which is quite big here, which the people of Ulster are this tribe of Dan. I don't go there. Okay?
So we'll discuss this later.
I don't go there. It's too crazy. But I think we should stick to our own nations. And that would lead to what I would call, there only is a Christian nationalism. There is no other form of nationalism.
So let me posit this to you, right? So you're absolutely correct. There's different types of nationalism. There's religious nationalism. There's ethno-nationalism. There's pan-Christian nationalism. There's different types of nationalism. But that nationalism, broadly speaking, is an identity of a nation grounded on culture, language, and or religion. That's like a very generic definition, right? And Islam, and I'm asking you because I'd like to get your thoughts on it. You mentioned, we briefly spoke about it because you said the similarities between Islam and Catholicism in the way it's quite pan in its thinking as opposed to
internationalism.
Yep. So in Islam and in the Quran, Allah says, I have created many tribes and nations for you to get to know one another. So that's actually explicitly mentioned that Allah, God, created many tribes and nations so we actually get to know one another.
I get to know you, but I don't want you living in my house.
Do I need to be here for 7 generations?
Stop.
But let me ask you this. What's your thoughts on the following statement of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? No white man is superior to a black man. No black man is superior to a white man. No Arab is superior to a non-Arab. No non-Arab is superior to an Arab, except in piety and good deeds. Second statement, the Muslim Ummah, as in the collective Muslim body, is like one body. When one part of it aches, the rest of the body responds with fever and restlessness. So in Islam, we're actually very anti-nationalism. The nationalism that we have in the 50 plus Muslim countries were born out of colonialism.
Yeah.
They were born out of the independence struggle against European colonial powers.
The British drawing lines on that.
British and French drawing lines, Sykes-Picot and all that kind of stuff, drawing their lines and all that kind of stuff. But generally, at its core, we're quite anti-nationalist and we're quite pan-Islamic in our mindset. What is, if any, you have an issue with the internationalist approach?
I think it's a strange approach, and I can see it because, as I said earlier to you, if you look at all the Catholic countries in Europe, they have secular tricolours. France, Ireland even, and all they've secular. The Protestant countries all have saints' flags. Now, I think if you want an explanation for it, I think after the Reformation, we had any statues and holy icons and all that, and we sort of are very pious and say we don't do that stuff anymore, but we replaced it with flags. To be honest, we've got to be honest about it. We replaced it with flags, but also...
Replace idols with flags, is that what you're saying?
More idols, flags became idols for many people.
Well, that's a type of nationalism.
Of course, it is, and that's where I think because Protestants realised that God gave us our nations, and as we broke away from the Roman Catholic Church, it wasn't easy. It took 200 years. When you're on an island here, which is steeped in blood, you look at Germany. Germany lost a third of its population in the religious wars. So when we managed to form our societies like Holland and England and Scotland, we really were so grateful that God had seen us through these bad times, because slaughter like the world has never seen before, and then we were free. Here in 1641, just about every single Protestant here, this was one of the few towns that survived. 3 towns, Londonderry, here, and then Skillen. People were massacred. Within 2 miles of this building, people were lying by the thousands dead in the streets. So when we got our nations, we were so grateful to God, we made our national flag a saint's flag. And our idea of who we are, our cultural identity, is the flag, the nation, and our religion. Completely intertwined. It's inseparable for me. I cannot separate out me being a British Ulster. Well, first of all, I'm an Ulster Scot. First of all, and remember 1912, we brought 30,000 rifles in here, not to fight the Irish, but to fight the British, to remain British. That's an oxymoron, but that's what we did. Much bigger than the IRA's ever done. We armed 100,000 men to fight the British, to stay British. Not so much to stay British, but not to be Irish, not to be under Roman Catholic domination. So it's impossible for me to strip out my tribal identity from my religious identity.
How would you define yourself in order then? So I am a Muslim of Bangladeshi heritage, born in the UK.
Yes, oh, absolutely. So that's simple. I am a Reformed Christian, a Protestant, of the Ulster variety, and loyal to, at the moment, but for political reasons, Britain. So I'm a Protestant, Ulster, British.
Some say it's Putin. How true is that?
I don't trust the Russians. I've got to be honest with you. Now, I support Putin. I support Putin, what he's doing in the Ukraine war. I was in Ukraine many years ago when the whole Donbass thing was going off and the mad neo-Nazis were slaughtering people. And one of the jobs I do, we can come to later, is go and see militias who are Nietzschean, neo-Nazi, white power, knuckle draggers, and actually saying to them, this is not acceptable.
But those labels are attributed to you. But those labels have been attributed to you.
But it's not true. You can see me. I'm none of these things. And I go into very dangerous situations and say to these militias, you know, we will help you, providing you turn to God. And it's worked with some. Some of them, they say, go away, we don't want nothing to do with it. That's fine. Some have said, yeah, we witness to them and say, you need to get back to your roots. You need to get back to Christianity. And you need to clean up your act. Now, some of the militias we worked with in Hungary, for example, they went back to their faith. There's no swearing allowed. There's no cheating on your wife allowed. There's no fornicating with women allowed, and you've got to be married. These are militias with 30,000 men. Before, 20 years ago, they were listening to Screwdriver, skinhead music, were behaving like pigs. So that's what I do. And I went to Ukraine to do the same with them. But I've got to tell you, I didn't get a good reception. I found them the most vicious, insanely nationalistic in a Nazi way that I've ever met in my life. And I couldn't do anything with them. I said, I don't want you. I won't have anything to do with you. I walked away. So that kind of nationalism, reject it.
Monotheism.
Well, of course, I've been a Christian, but and somebody was saying there was arguing with a Unitarian. We've actually got a Unitarian church in this town. You only find them in Hungary and Northern Ireland, Unitarians. Yeah. So there's an old argument, and there was a big argument in the 1750s, 1780s here about Unitarianism, monotheism, and the whole problematic theology that some people have with the Trinity. Doesn't bother me. I'm fine with it, and I understand it, and I accept it, and I believe it. But what I see now is people. I think we're way beyond the old theological arguments now, because people now have no God, yet many gods. Where do you find people now on a Sunday? Where do you find them? You find them at the great temple of the shopping mall.
Oh, of course.
Going before the altar of consumerism, and then they have their money. So they have replaced the money system is irrelevant to the most people now in the world, because they have replaced God with several gods with small g, but they're not. They're demons. They're devils, because they're destructive to the human soul, the human being, the natural order of things. So that's the main problem for me. But it is a difficult concept if you're not a Christian, unless you get really into it in your mindset. We believe in one, but three, and three in one. You know, the Serbs have this. They have this, the Trinity, and then one.
Muslims have this.
Yeah, exactly. The Serbs do. And if you might notice, when I do any kind of salute to the crowds and that, I do this.
Be careful, because that's like a Turkish nationalist group, Wolfgang.
Yeah, the Wolfgang who shot the Pope. I didn't know he shot the Pope some years ago. So I don't want to be associated with this. But yeah, so that's what we do. So it's difficult. And the three in one is a very difficult concept. But it's what we believe. It's in our creed. This is what we believe. I don't have a particular problem with it. I think there is a problem with modern Christianity, because there's a lot of modern people like Baptist Pentecostals and these kind of loose Christians. But I tend not to get. I studied apologetics. I don't use it, and Jada Franson often chides me for not using apologetics. I'm a Calvinist. I believe that your name is, well, the Bible says your name has been written in the Lamb's Book of Life before the foundation of the world. You will be called. You cannot reject it. It's tulip. Total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace and perseverance of the saints. Tulip. That's the 5 points of Calvinism. So it's no for me to persuade people or cajole people or use tricks or fancy music in the church and all that stuff that they do nowadays, these mega churches, to make people in an emotional state. Come on up the front, give your heart to Jesus. This is all nonsense and this kind of stuff. It's not right. So I don't do apologetics. I just don't do it.
What about things like logic, Occam razor, and these kind of like philosophical tools to make the scripture more accessible?
No, I'm a Calvinist. We don't do that. We're commanded to preach the word. What you do it is entirely between you and the Holy Spirit. God sending the Holy Spirit to work with you in unction. If your name is in the Lamb's Book of Life, you'll be drawn in. If you're not, you're not. To use philosophy and use intellect and all that is me. It's Jim Dowson then. Using his power or intellect to try and convince people to become Christian. If God can't do it, James Dowson cannot do it.
So do you believe that verbatim citing verses from the Bible is sufficient and adequate to convince someone?
They are supernatural.
Okay.
The book is inspired, it's God-breathed. The book is supernatural. It's not how eloquent I am or how fancy a preacher I am or how persuasive I am. And I really hate these persuasive preachers. I knew one guy used to drop like $20 notes in the ground, but on the back's a Bible track. Look, if you believe in election, which I do, you're chosen before the foundation of the world, there is nothing that I can do to persuade you. Why would I even try? It's arrogance in the most outrageous form. If you're one of God's, he'll draw you in. How does he do that? It says in the Bible, by the word. How did they get the word? They hear the word. How did they hear that? By preaching the word. So you have to preach the word. The word is power into itself. The actual words, they are supernatural. So if I convey those words from the Bible, those words can be used then, but the Holy Spirit then can make that conversion process start, but only because of the Bible's words, not my words. So apologetics to me is ludicrous.
What Bible do you
King
read?
James.
King James, yeah? On top of your head, how many different Bibles are there?
Way too many. Never used to be, but recently in the last, say, 30 years, masses. And
do you believe it's a perfectly preserved scripture?
Well, before when the King James came out, most Protestants wouldn't use it. For example, the Pilgrim Fathers, who were Calvinists, fellow Calvinists like me, they went to the New World with the Geneva Bible or the Breeches Bible, because it describes trousers as breeches, and Americans still use the word breeches. So they went with the Geneva Bible. So it's the text that's behind those Bibles. It's the same text behind the Geneva Bible, which is behind the King James Bible.
So you're of the position that the Bibles that are in existence today is more the Spirit of God as opposed to the literal Word of God?
Oh no, they are the literal Word of God. They're the inspired Word, the breathed Word of God, but obviously they're translated from the Hebrew, the Greek. Of course they are. They're translations. Now, would that mean the Bibles are absolutely perfect? No, because men are involved. Preserved. You get the odd... People can argue over the interpretation of a word or perhaps the structure of a sentence because it's coming from different traditions. That's fine. But what we've got now, for example, the King James Bible was 11 men locked in a building for like 14 years. The scholars of the day all come up with that. It was fairly good background. When you look at the NIV, which is a big Bible now, the New International Version, so the King James is a literal translation. The NIV is a dynamic translation. Do you know what that means?
No, tell me.
Well, dynamic means it's not literal. They will sit round, and the people who are on that board, some of them are Jehovah's Witnesses, some are Mormons. You know, you imagine all these people. And they say, well, what does Paul says, for example, women should cover their hair when praying or in church. Dynamic thing is, well, what does that mean culturally, given the times, and how does that translate to our modern times where we have moved on culturally? That's a dynamic translation.
What's your thoughts on that?
It's outrageous.
Because in the Quran, you know this, they say that they took their rabbis and monks as gods. So Allah tells us that the Jews and Christians, they took their rabbis and their monks as gods, meaning they allowed them to change the laws.
Yeah.
With that type of input, that the law says this, the text says this, but what does today's time
Well, I would say that's part of the old Roman Catholic thing, and that's why the Reformation was important, because the Reformation, to this day, the Roman Catholic Church said the Bible is really important. However, the Church is the final authority. You believe such a thing? So to us, the Bible is the final authority. But these modern Bibles are not direct translations. They are dynamic interpretations. Say, okay, this is 2023. So we think women now should wear bikinis going to church. And they would put that. So the Bibles nowadays they're not Bibles. They are horrific. And I tell people you must destroy them. If you have a NIV, an ASB, any of these modern Bibles, destroy them.
If you had your way, would you only keep the King James version?
Yes, but you've got to be careful because there's a cult movement in America, King James only, and they actually believe, I think, that Jesus spoke in 16th century English. And it's crazy. It's way over the top. It's way, way, way over the top. And I'm not saying in future, if good scholarly men get around, they could maybe produce an even better version from the original manuscripts. But you've got to be careful because the manuscripts that the modern Bibles are out here are so-called manuscripts that were found in a bin in Sinai in the 1880s. The monks had them for 1800 years and decided to throw them out just as he was walking by. And other ones were found in the Vatican Library, really. So you've got to be careful what manuscripts the text is coming from. And I think in the future, somebody could possibly produce an even more accurate and cleaner Bible than the King James. But for now, it's the best we've got.
But do you believe it's perfectly preserved?
Well, it depends. I believe the doctrine and the tenets are perfectly preserved. I think anything when you get into any kind of language, when you're translating, as you know, from Arabic into English or whatever, we're now translating from Hebrew and Aramaic into Greek into English.
But the Arabic Quran has... I'm merely asking you this because I know it's one of the topics of engagement between Christians and Muslims. So the Muslims will pride themselves in that the miracle of the Quran is its preservation, its perfect preservation, in that if you were to ban every single Arabic copy in the world, within an hour, someone from Indonesia will recite the exact same Quran as someone in Bangladesh.
Oh yes, in that sense, of course. The scriptures are totally preserved. They're inspired word of God. So if you wanted to be, because you're written in Arabic, of course, our Bible's root was Greek, then before that, Hebrew and Aramaic. So it's a wee bit more complicated for us.
So the Quran which we accept is only in Arabic.
Of course.
Everything else is just
So it's a wee bit simpler because you've still got that original translation. It's like everybody here learning. We'd still need to learn Hebrew for the Old Testament, Aramaic for parts of the New Testament, and Greek where a lot of the manuscripts were preserved. So it'd be a wee bit more difficult for us. But in essence, yes, the King James Bible is the preserved and word of God without any shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. And people should treat it as such.
Let me ask your thoughts on the following 5 political figures. Go Wilders.
Shell. He's a liberal. He's a neocon liberal. He's not right-wing in any way, shape or form by a mile. He is a neocon, pro-Israel mouthpiece.
Marine Le Pen, who I believe is part of the Knights Templars International. No?
Marine Le Pen?
Sorry, my mistake.
No.
That was my mistake. No, Marine Le Pen.
No. No, I get mixed up. Is that the father or the daughter?
The daughter.
The daughter? No. I know the father. He's a nice fella. It was quite fun. I had dinner with him a couple of times in the European Parliament. No, she started off okay.
Donald Trump.
Well,
you got an American flag.
Well, remember, we because Americans were over. Well, the front page of the New York Times said...
And you went to America.
Yeah. Oh, many times.
To help with the Trump 2016 election.
Oh, big time. Well, I didn't go to America to help then. I was all over Europe because we'd set up cells of young, smart people who were just putting out memes. But the front page of the New York Times said that we put 2 points on Trump. 2 points and Brexit. Well, Trump won by 2 points. Now, Trump was the best of a bad lot. He was far better than Hillary Clinton winning it because she's a demon.
How Christian do you think Trump is?
Well, I've got to be very careful and very gracious in how I address this.
No, meaning outwardly.
Well, outwardly? Well, he says he is.
Okay.
He says he's a Protestant. His mother's from the Isle of Skye in Scotland, Presbyterian, Calvinist. But, don't judge a man by what he says. Judge him by the fruits. By the fruits ye shall know them, the Lord told us, and it's true. Trump would have been re-elected the next time out if he'd have clamped down on Zuckerberg and Facebook and on Dorsey and Twitter. These people should be in jail. Can I just tell you that? These people should be in prison for their interference in national affairs. These people run social media companies. They have more power now than elected politicians and kings and bishops and popes even. These people need to be took down a peg or two And I would have, with no hesitation, put Mark Zuckerberg and that Dorsey in prison, in jail for their behaviour. Trump didn't do that. Why? And then he fills the White House, he fills this whole administration by dual citizenship people. Let me tell you something, I don't believe in dual citizenship. You're American or you're not. But these are American Israelis. Well, you know where their loyalty lies. If somebody tells me...
They don't even shy away or hide anymore.
No, they don't hide it no more. They're all blatant about it. So if you're an American, can I just tell you something? The American people are the sweetest, most lovely, decent people, courteous people I've ever met in the planet. And bar none. Bar none. They are beautiful, beautiful people. I mean that. I've been in the Midwest. I cannot believe how gracious and courteous and how devout and lovely and honest they are. And the reason they're being led like that is because they are so honest and gullible. So these people in Washington are completely manipulating these lovely, simple, a lot of them are simple faith people, and they're being manipulated. But who's doing it? Well, you know who's doing it. If you look at maybe 60 key staff at the White House, I think 52 of them are dual Israeli citizens. How can that be?
Vladimir Putin. I know we touched upon him just before.
Well, as I say, I've got to tell you, I don't
because some have accused
I don't trust Russians.
Okay, but some have accused you of being shilling and sympathising with him.
I do sympathise with him. I don't get paid for that, so I'm not shilling. You know, I'm not Tommy Rose. I don't get my bank balance topped up by Likud. The people always think Tommy worked for Mossad. It's always Likud. You remember a couple of years ago, Tommy was very pro-LGBT, pro-trans. All of a sudden, he's not because of Likud. Look at the cabinet. The cabinet is full of mad right-wingers. Yeah. So all of a sudden, so that's it. So I don't shill for anybody. The only person I shill for is Jesus Christ. And he pays me far more than money. But Russia had to do what they had to do.
Why do they accuse you of that? I've seen it online.
Well, they do all the time, don't they? I mean, dear me, I've been accused of being everything from a Catholic priest to a homosexual. No, I tell you, I've never been accused of being a homosexual. Everything else in between, yes, but never homosexual. Praise be God. But, and if you ever see it, it's not true. It never could be true. Yeah. But no, Putin was brave enough to take on the West. And all of this stuff we see right now is all to do with the international finance system. The countries now like India and like some of the emerging nations, the Southeast Asian nations and China, they're threatening the homogeny of the West, the power of the West. We've been the big dogs. Now, British people, we used to be the big dogs, and then we lost the big dog status. America's the big dogs now. They're losing it. Rome came and went. You know, the Ottomans came and went. You have your day in the sun, then you don't, and somebody else takes over. The Americans are struggling and kicking back against this at the moment. Mm-hmm. But Putin is one of the few guys who's actually stood up against them and said, no, we're not having this. Now, he'd done his best. You go back 10 years ago, Putin was bending over backwards to appease the West. Yeah. Then they realised you cannot appease mad dogs. Mm-hmm. They want total domination. And anybody who, look what the West has done to Iraq, Afghanistan. You know, a load of Saudi Arabians blow up the Twin Towers. The West invades Afghanistan. You know, bizarre, and still arms Saudi Arabia.
To then hand it back. Then hand it back.
I know, it's madness. It's total lunacy. So that's why I supported Putin from a nationalist Christian perspective. Now, I believe Putin's a Christian, Orthodox, which I've got problems with. You know, to me they're similar to the Catholics. But still, you know, every man to their own. But he has rebuilt the huge cathedrals that the communists pulled down in Moscow. Huge cathedrals, massive. Where did they get the money? He went around all the oligarchs and said, give us the money that you've took, that you shouldn't have. A couple 100 million, we'll say no more about it. And all that money went into building beautiful places.
Do you see him as a reviver of European Christendom?
Yeah. Well, no European Christendom, Eastern Christendom. Because the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russians are so different. You've got to understand, I'm sympathetic, but the Russians are not European. They've got an Oriental mind.
You think so?
Absolutely.
Aspects. Uh-huh. They're still Western. They're still Europe.
And their thought process. Yeah. Their thought process is strange. You know, I've done a lot of business because before it was in the ministry, I was in business. And we would never do business, basically east of Budapest, or south of Budapest. When you get into the Slavics and the Orthodox people, they're so different, so difficult to read their minds. It's hard, very, very hard. And they have a total different outlook in life. And a lot of it's not very good. It's like, if you can con a man, do it. It's his fault for being a fool, which is not Western. It's not supposed to be Western, you know. So I'm very suspicious of all the Eastern folks. But I do get on with a lot of Russians, and I go on with the Serbs and people like that, of course, you know. But they're different.
Viktor Orban.
Well, he's a fellow Calvinist. However, he did have me thrown out of the country.
That's why I asked.
Arrested. And put in jail with all the Albanians, which was not very pleasant.
As an undesirable individual.
Danger to national security.
Danger to national security.
Can you imagine it?
Were you a danger to the national security?
No. How could I be a danger to anybody? You know, it's a silliness. I'm a nice wee guy from Northern Ireland and I don't bother anybody. I don't know where that came from. I think it came from, this is what I think. And I've been told. At that time, Soros was causing a lot of problems in Hungary.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, there's a Soros University there. There was all the Soros NGOs there. We held a massive conference in this big building in the centre, and we invited not only all the nationalist groups, we invited all the media, invited all the left wing, invited everybody. See, we're not hide. Come and see this. The left wing came in, the usual shaking, think we're all going to attack them. Nobody's attacking anybody. And we said to the media, the reason we've got you here because we don't fear you. You think you can write nasty articles because at that time I was in the papers every day in Hungary, front page. So you think you're powerful, you're strong. What you have, pencils. Look at these nationalists. They don't drink, they don't smoke, they've got muscles, they go to the gym every day. You have this. You have this.
Mm-hmm.
And you better hope the society doesn't break down because you won't last 2 minutes. We're not frightened of you. And I think because of that speech, and I think because we mentioned Soros, that all of these journalists are in the pay of George Soros. He takes them all to Romania every year. Did you know this? Even Western journalists, even the British, they all go to this huge camp where it's a big jolly with loads of drinking women and men and all that. Every August, and all thousands and thousands of Western journalists go there, and they're all singing off the same hymn sheet. So we attacked Soros. But Nick was very amiss to mention that, do you know that, and he gave the address of the building up the street, which was the headquarters of the Soros secret kind of control mechanism. And of course, a couple of days later, a load of nationalists went up and wrecked the place. Yeah. And then the police found drunks in it and arrested them all. So Soros was getting flung out. His university was shut down, but I think there had to be a sacrificial lamb.
Jim, let's get into the crux of the podcast. I'm in your prayer building. There's flags of Knight Templars who are part of the Crusader movement. I know that you have a wide fraternity of links. I know you said I'm a wee man, innocent man, and all that kind of stuff, but there's a reason why the Times described you as the invisible man behind Britain's far right.
Well, the guy who wrote that is the MI5 contact as well. The guy who wrote that story.
But it was a very interesting quote.
It was interesting.
Are you the invisible man behind the Britain's far right?
Well, I'm not very invisible. You know, I'm everywhere. I'm all over the place. But I tell you a funny story about that wee guy who wrote that story. I had him flung out of a place once. I was told no media. And he got in. He said, do you know who I am? I said, yes. You're media. You're not allowed in. And he wouldn't go. And he challenged me. He said, yeah, you're going to throw me out. So I'm only a wee man. But these big chaps here, we pay money. They're called security. They're going to throw you out. And they threw him out and ripped his nose in the process. But anyway, that's a side issue. I'm not invisible. I'm here. I mean, you know, I'm online. I use my own name. I don't do anything behind the scenes. Everybody knows who I am. I've been about for a long time. Long time. I've been very visible in the pro-life work. Gone back 30 years.
Which is primarily was your thing to begin with, the anti-abortion.
Absolutely. That's my love. That's my first love. Because that's how we all start off, is in the womb. And if we're attacking humans, for goodness sake, in the womb, what's wrong with us? I mean, this is crazy stuff. And that leads to I believe the whole world is in a problem now. I mean, everything that's going on in the world is down to our inhumanity, butchering children in the womb. God has a special place for children. So we're cursed. We're a cursed nation. And homosexuality. That's the two things. And the third one is women out of control. That's the three things I believe is responsible for everything. So I'm not invisible because I've been very vocal on all of these things. The flag protests in Belfast, and you know, I don't know why they would say I'm an invisible man.
What was the fallout because Ulster Unionist was initially your background is still very much is your background? What was the fallout? There was a fallout, wasn't it? Was there any kind of fallout over differences with the Orange Brigade or the Orange?
Oh no, that's union and political. Orange is a different thing. No, during when they done the peace agreement, you know, all those years ago, when we allowed a bunch of mad Marxist terrorist scum into government, you cannot have a country with men and women of violence. Okay, and we allowed the Sinn Féin.
You're talking about Sinn Féin, yeah.
You can't have it. You can't have it. Look, I was in the paramilitary forces, and I believe that would then bar me from high office, of course. that when war starts, people, it's a difficult thing. War's a difficult thing. It's a horrible thing. And then when peace comes, which is inevitably does, that's worked out by the politicians and the other people. The men of violence, the men who were on the tools, on the guns and on the things, you have to step aside. You should step aside and let the people try and make a go of it. It's very difficult when I put my television on and I'm looking at IRA men who butchered men, women and children of my tribe.
But people would say the same.
That.
I get that. What about those who would say the same about the DUP?
Well, how could they? The DUP is a political party. None of them have ever been terrorists.
None of those guys have ever been involved in paramilitary activities.
No, ever.
Or how would you counter the argument that the reason why the Sinn Féin leaders were previously involved in these kind of things is because they were the popular movement? So, so naturally they would have progressed from armed resistance to politics once there was peace agreements.
Possibly, and nobody's arguing with that. But I'm talking about individuals. So if you're an individual who was on the front line, you should remove yourself because it's just too hurtful. It's the same as when the UVF stood and the UDA stood, political parties. None of us Protestants voted for them. Minuscule. Because we know we're decent people. We know that it'd be hurtful for Roman Catholic people to see a politician that we'd voted for who had murdered women and children. This would not be acceptable. This is not decent. Sinn Féin seem to have this part of their brain missing. They have this missing, but they're Marxists. They're not Roman Catholics. Let's be very clear about this. They're not Catholic. They pretended, the provisional IRA pretended to be Catholics in the early 70s to take power away from the official IRA. But they've always been Maoists and Marxists and whatnot.
But they had a split between themselves. There was those who wanted to identify a line with more their Catholic.
Well, that was the lie. No, that was the myth. The official IRA were all communists.
Of course.
They'd been put in jail with the Cypriots and they all came out communists. I know some of them. I know the leader of that group who, when they come back from a British prison camp in Cyprus, went out a devout Catholic, come back a communist, and she said, out of my house. But the provos, that's what they done in the 70s. They deliberately said, we are Catholics, we will defend the Catholic people. But they were even more left-wing than the people they replaced. This was all a front. Apart from Mark McGuinness, there's very few devout Roman Catholics. Now, I know some IRA men. I'm friendly with to this day. And I say friendly, but, we've all moved on in life, and I
don't think they deny their Marxist leanings, though. I don't think it's a secret.
They do here. They do in Ireland. They would be very cagey in Ireland. They're very cagey.
These days, but before.
Yeah. Well, we know when the Americans are coming over. This is funny. When the Americans are coming, the Norwegian people and the senators and the Republicans and the Democrats and Tip O'Neill and all that, well, we know when they're coming. Why? At the bottom of the falls, they've got Che Guevara. They have Nelson Mandela, Winnie Mandela. They're all covered. They're all covered up. All covered up. So Americans must be in town.
But the Palestine morals stay. They can't cover those up.
I would suggest they will cover them up. But they will cover them up. I don't know. I've never looked to see if they cover the Palestine ones up. You better believe they will. They cover it up, they'll upset the Americans. So the Americans are so stupid. They think these are the Irish and when I see Americans come here and I take them round the falls and I say, look at that, they're horrified. They're genuinely aghast because they've given money to the old country. And most Americans aren't Irish, they're Ulster Scots, the biggest desperate in America from these Isles.
So the Boston Irish guys are Protestants?
No, Boston Irish are Irish. My people went there in the 1720s, 1730s, 300,000-400,000. We're the hillbillies. So Tennessee, West Virginia, all of those places, that Bible Belt are Ulster Scots. 14 American presidents come from here, Ulster. 14. So that's who we are. The Boston Irish, New York Irish, they came in much later. They come in in the potato farm in 1840s, 1850s.
Do you not see any credence or any validity? I don't want to focus too much on the island because there's lots for us to cover. But do you not see any validity in the argument that the Ulster Unionists are ultimately English colonial settlers, or at least remnants of the colonial?
No, we're no English for a start. I think I agree with the Irish in one way. An Englishman,
British colonialists.
Yeah, well, an Englishman has no business in County Kerry. This is Ulster. This is another myth. I remember in the 1860s they came up with this Gaelic revival mythology, which they had to do to keep themselves alive. But a lot is mythology. For example, what you would call now the Irish, Southern Irish, the Gaels, the Catholic community, for simplifying it, they arrived here 2,200 years ago. Newgrange, which is their equivalent to Stonehenge, was here. It had been there for 2,000 years beforehand. All these standing stones around here had been here for 2,000 years before the Gaels arrived. They built them. So their narrative is we were the first people here, then all these people are invaded. Now, the English had no business being here, but my people, the Ulster Scots, the Pretini, the Picts, whatever you want to call us, the Ulad, that's what Ulster gets his name, we never left. We were pushed out with the Gaelic invasion. We only survived in this area, North Down, County Antrim, and the west coast of Scotland. At one time, this was one nation called Dalriada. This is historical facts. And it's always funny, and if you're going to see some Sinn Féin people later, ask them, when did the Gaels come here? And they'll say, right off the bat, about 2,500 years ago. But Newgrange was built 7,000 years ago. Who built that? They don't know what to say, because there's nothing worse than a man believes his own propaganda. Then you're into dangerous ground.
What about...
So my people have every right here. The English, no right. And remember, this town was a hotbed of... We had a thing in 1798 called the United Irishmen's Rebellion. There's a pike out there, lying out there, you can go and have a look at it. Mm. That's where the Presbyterians and the Roman Catholics joined forces to chase the English out. It failed. Why? Because the minute it started, the Catholics resorted to sectarian murder of my people, and that was the revolution over. But the Wexford, the Protestants were piked over the bridge, thousands were massacred, so we had to withdraw. But we had access for a time. For a time, we joined forces with the Catholics to try and get Ireland's independence. And this town, Presbyterian town, was a hotbed of United Irishmen. So we have cooperated in the past. We have worked in the past. And now I work very closely with serious Irish Catholics. I don't work with Irish Marxists. I never will. I'm a bit of reverse, I hope not hate. No platform for Marxists. No platform for Zionists. I won't have anything to do with communists because they're godless heathens and they're demonic. They're of their father, the devil, they're satanic. But I will work with serious Latin Mass Catholics. I mean real hardline medieval Catholics. They're some of my friends. No problem with it. None.
So very briefly, tell me the trajectory, because that's where your roots are, the anti-abortion movement.
Yeah.
I know you're very big on flags. We can get to that later on. But tell me, from there to National Front, to BNP, to Britain First.
Oh, I've been very busy.
Been very busy, haven't you?
Very busy. Well, I grew up in a very working class Protestant background in Scotland, but I grew up in a town where every single person in that town comes from Ulster. My grandparents, my wife's grandparents were all refugees with the separation of the partition of India. When the English caused a lot of trouble with the English. They partitioned Ireland, and my family and my wife's family come from Cavan, and we had to flee. We were under persecution, and people murdered family, people murdered. We had to leave. So I grew up in a very, very environment of being very acutely aware of Ulster. And I remember being 5 years old when the trouble started. My father saying, "Come and watch this," and there was the riots in Londonderry and the stuff in our whole street. And I remember in the 1970s when the Catholics butchered 10 workmen on a van, innocent men, Protestants in South Armagh, hundreds of them were being slaughtered, ethnic cleansing. And I remember my dad and all the neighbours collecting money. It was poor, and we built an extension to our militia, our Orange Hall. We built a big extension, huge place, because we were going to evacuate the women and children out, and our men were going to go over and fight to protect our land and our people. So I remember collecting the blankets and collecting the tins and collecting the money in 1975. I remember all of that, and I was first arrested then because I was collecting money for the Loyalists, for the Loyalist prisoners, for the families of the men who were in jail for defending their communities. And I was arrested. But in Scotland, they can't prosecute you if you're 10, which was very fortunate. But by the age of 16, I was running guns, explosives, all that when I was a kid. And from that, as I told you earlier, I went down to London to try and get the National Front to have a band, a marching band to get a militia, because that's how we do things. We're not military people. We're a very militant and military people. The old thing with the IRA, if the English hadn't come in here in 1969, the troubles would never have started. We would have dealt with it quickly. We'd have been in Dublin in 2 weeks. It'd have been over. End of. The CIA gave a report to the Irish because they said they were going to come in to Londonderry to save their people if we'd have started on them, or militiamen. The CIA said, don't do that. The Loyalists are strong enough to be in Dublin in 2 weeks. Don't do it. I wish they had done it. It'd all been over by now. When it all came to a peace agreement a long time ago, and a lot of innocent people wouldn't have had to die. So that was my genealogy, and from going to see the NF, I was horrified. I'll give you an example of, we hear the old thing in the 70s, Paki bashing. Well, that changed me. That changed my life. There was a young white boy on a motorbike was brother. He was disabled. And the blacks pulled him off his motorbike somewhere in Brixton and stabbed him to death. And I was down in the National Front headquarters, and they were all going wild. These big, bald head, muscles, big guys, all going wild. They're going to get vengeance. At that time, I was a very experienced loyalist. I was dealing in guns and explosives and weapons and training and all that. And I've got all these big men, grown men, saying they're going to get vengeance. And I thought, right, we're going to go and do something. We're going to go and hit one of these Rastafari places, whatever. We're going to hit them. And do you know what they did? They went to the White Swan pub in Thornton Heath in London, got blind drunk, went out and grabbed two Pakistani lads. They were as thin as a beanpole. Wee lads, wee guys, quite well educated, wee Pakistani lads. And they kicked them all over the street. And I remember looking at my friend that day, and we were horrified. And I said, I want no part of this. These people are cowards. Because we love our people, our brothers and sisters in Ulster. I wake up in the morning and somebody in the old days was shot dead in Fermanagh. I don't know who that man is personally, but he's part of my tribe. He's a co-religionist, he's a Protestant, he's part of my tribe. I would immediately seek vengeance. Now, I know that's wrong, but war's a funny thing. It turns your brain. I would immediately seek vengeance against his death. And these guys have witnessed a young white man, a handicap, being stabbed to death by Caribbeans, and they're out kicking wee Pakistani boys about. And that horrified me, and that's when I totally rejected all of that National Front nonsense. And from then I went into business, and eventually I got into pro-life, because one day I was going to an anti-gay rally being hosted by Ian Paisley in Belfast. And I was going down to this anti-gay thing, and it was this. I seen these horrible pictures on a stand, and I thought, that's them bloody animal rights people again, because they're all like ripped up things. So I went down to tell them what I thought of them on my way to the gay rally. And I don't know if you ever had this experience. Your brain cannot take in what you're looking at. You just can't take it in. Yeah, until I went that close. I thought, my goodness, these are babies, ripped apart. I was never been shocked in all my life, even during the Troubles. I've been never as shocked. And I could hear the words coming out of my mouth. I was shouting and screaming at these people, you Catholics, you're all mad. For showing the truth. But one wee Catholic lady, God bless her. So I've got this funny relationship with Catholics. They've been very pivotal in my life. This wee woman let me scream and rant and rave and say terrible things. She slipped in a little envelope with postcards in it. And when I went to the gay rally, I said, I've just met a load of mad Catholics, and I was ranting and raving. Got home, saying to the wife, what's this in my pocket? And I took it out, and there was pictures of the abortions. And me and my wife put them on the table, and we got on our knees, and we broke our hearts. We cried uncontrollably for hours. Because as a Protestant, I'm very civic. This is my country. Everything done in this country is done. I can't say, well, I didn't vote for them, so it's not my fault. No, that doesn't work like that. Everything done in this country is done in my name. So if I don't like something, I've got to fight against it. And what had I ever done about abortion? Nothing. And from then, I didn't know what to do. I just thought, what do? You go outside the abortion clinic, start screaming abuse at them and say, don't do it, and tracking these people down. And so that came to the attention of Roman Catholics, and they said, this guy's an orange man, we can't have anything to do with him. He's an orange man, my goodness, a loyalist. And I met this family called the Willises. And they're the most devout, lovely Catholic family I've ever met in my life. And can I tell you, they probably moulded me more than anybody else on this planet. And they are devout Romanists. But they made me the man I am. And then from then, obviously, the BNP. I was at a meeting.
Tell me about BNP.
BNP was very interesting.
What was your actual role in the BNP?
Well, I ran everything. I originally went in to do fundraising for them, but I ended up doing everything. Capo del tutti de tutti. I ran everything. Every single thing. The staff, the emails, the marketing, the ideology, everything. Nick would come up with the ideas.
How close were you to Nick?
I was with him nearly every day. Stayed with him. Stayed in his house.
A brother of yours?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But he there's difficulties because he's English. And at that time, he wasn't particularly strong on the Christian stuff, which I found odd. And he had this sort of very strange attitude. The BNP, to me, were not British nationalists.
What were they?
Well, I don't know. They didn't like the Queen. They didn't like Churchill. They thought the wrong side won in the war. The wrong side won in the war and all this. It was all madness. But the reason I get involved with them is because UKIP were mucking about at that time, and Britain was in a bad state. And was at a big business meeting, 'cause I used to do marketing. That was at a firm that done quite high level marketing all over the world. And I was in at a meeting.
How come you're the money man?
Well, because I know how to make it. And it's not because I'm so clever, but if you see the average British nationalist, well, you're not up against much. Remember, and there is a true saying, the last refuge of a rogue is patriotism. That's quite true, actually, sadly. But anyway, I was at this big business meeting in the Mall in London, in the Institute of Directors Club, and Nick Griffin going to telly, and it was his trial. Do you remember his trial?
Yes, of course.
And I think this was Tony Blair was saying that although he's been found not guilty, they're going to retry him, and they changed 1,000 years of British history. There's a habeas corpus, and they're going to try him again. And a lot of these businessmen said, this is actually an attack on the fabric of our society. He's scum. We hate him. And all these businessmen hated Nick Griffin, hated the BNP. They said, this is dangerous. And these people are so ill-equipped to deal with things. Wouldn't it be good if somebody who knew what they were doing went in there and revolutionised them to give the establishment a fright and maybe allowed UKIP? So the whole idea was to, instead of chapping doors about immigration and the Muslim thing and all that, kick the doors in. The BNP kicks the door in. The establishment would say, oh my goodness, what's going on? But possibly that would allow UKIP to enter. And that was the whole strategy. I says, okay, I contacted him. I says, look, I'll do work for you. My company will take over for 3 years. We'll get you elected. We'll do all this. But you need to do exactly what we say you need to do and follow your lead, and we'll show you. And that's what we did. And Nick Griffin was very sceptical. I says, okay, we'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do you an appeal 2 weeks' time. It was November 2007. So we'll do you an appeal. And within a couple of days, I can tell you what it'll bring in. You tell me the first 2 days of return mail. So we sent an appeal out to 17,000 people. We done it all, manufactured it, put it through our machine. We have a machinery to do automatic mailings. And I phoned them on the first day the mail, because we send out so it arrives with people on a Saturday. So the Monday, the first mail came in, and he told me how many envelopes had come in and how much money was there. And I told him that's going to bring in between 120,000 and 130,000. And he said, how could you possibly know that? And after 3 or 4 weeks, brilliant, exactly, top end of that. How could you know that? I said, because I'm an expert. I train in this. It's a profession. It's like professional people know their business. They know their job. So that was it. That was the confidence then. That was us in.
What happened in 2010?
Well, 2010 was a crazy year. The actual BNP's vote was very, very good. The BNP's vote held up very, very well.
What happened with you?
Oh, well, there's a lot of things. By that stage, I mean, the thing is, the BNP was driven by agents. I mean, you've no idea. Because of my experience in Northern Ireland, I could spot them. I could spot him at 20 yards away. He's an agent, he's an agent, he's an agent. The IT guy actually told us he was an agent, and we still kept him employed. He told us he was an agent. We had recordings.
Agent for who?
MI5, he was getting paid, and he told us this, and we still kept him. And on the day of the general elections, he actually took the website down, which was the busiest and most visited political website on the planet. And it was just a black screen with Jim Dowson as a CU, the bad word.
Yeah.
And all the media thought it was hilarious. On the day of the election, this was there. But anyway, there was a lot of crazy stuff happened. And then there was all these, and I was getting rid of them. I was saying he's an agent, proving it, tapping people, surveying people, proving they were agents, and making sure, Nick, we need to get rid of them. They're nice, but they're agents, they need to go. And in Northern Ireland, they'll be in a bog somewhere. Get rid of them. But then there was a woman who, I was actually on a boat with a wife, and somebody phoned us and said, you're front page of the paper. I said, what? You're in Private Eye. I said, what? And they got this big blonde woman.
There's two things.
Yeah.
There's one of the accusations or claims was that you were no longer trustworthy to oversee the affairs of BNP, and another to do with the woman.
Oh, it's a woman? I never heard the untrustworthy thing about it.
But so say 2010, was there a case of resignation or dismissal?
No, no. I'd already said I was only going to give them 3 years. So that time was up.
Also, the contract already expired.
The contract was expired in October. And I said to Nick, I'll be going in October, but what I'll do, I'll stay on for an extra 6 months. If you get rid of the people who ousted them, honestly, get rid of them and I'll give you another 6 months. He wouldn't do it, so I left. But in between then, so around about the August time, there was no need for it because I was leaving anyway. And it's come out now. Hope No Hate gave this girl and a guy called, well, I won't mention his name because he'll need to cut it. But anyway, a guy runs another party now. Gave him a load of money, $8,500 to make this video. So the video starts with this very, very attractive young blonde. Not my cup of tea, actually. A bit big for me, to be honest. But she's a quite pretty young girl. And she's sitting with a cardigan on, like Miss Jean Brodie, the cashmere cardigan with the hanky up. And, I was in a hotel room, allegedly, at a £400 a night hotel room. And that, a lot of people said, no chance, no way. When I'm after Bridge and Bardo eating. Anyway, she said I was in this hotel room with this woman in the middle of the night. And there was nothing in it. It was all platonic, but we shared the bed. Can you imagine? But in the middle of the night, she woke up with my clammy hands all over her. I've got to tell you this in all seriousness. And she said we're all intoxicated. A drunk Ulster Scotsman, me, in a bed with a 23-year-old blonde woman, there'd have been more than hands. I know who I am, and there'd have been a lot more than hands.
Did it affect your marriage anyway?
No, because that weekend they said that harmed. I was on a boat going from Cork to Santander. So it's physically impossible. The whole thing was made up. And the media were quite good, actually, because they said there's something wrong with this. First of all, Dowson would never take a woman to a £400 a night hotel. That's not him. He's a tight Scotsman. But secondly, this doesn't look right. There's something wrong about it. And then it came out she was a model for FHM and nuts, and she was like, oh, naked and all that stuff. She was preparing herself as a Vestal Virgin. So a lot of people right away seen right through it. But obviously it causes you a lot of embarrassment and problems. But luckily, most people around here know me. Mm-hmm. They know me and they say, no way is that. That's just a load of garbage. Because you get accused of all sorts. I mean, the front page one here, Dowson and shotgun terror. I was walking down the beach with a wee 3-year-old boy with his little green and pink shotgun, that size, in the local paper here. Dowson and shotgun terror. Yeah, nasty stuff. But they knew, Hope Not Hate knew, the only reason the BNP were successful because of me and the input of our firm, the marketing. And we got into all the Nazi stuff. We ran the 2009 European campaign with Spitfires and Winston Churchill and V for Victory. Most of the BNP hated this. When I had to go to meetings, I had to get security. People were going to attack me physically. Because with Spitfires, Vera Lynn, all that White Cliffs of Dover, all of that genre that British patriots like me love, they hate. So how do you class yourselves as a British National Party when you hate everyone British?
Why wouldn't they hate that? Because I noticed Nick is ardently anti-imperial.
Anti-imperial, anti-royal. I mean, there's only one person who could get 5 million people on the street now, is Her Majesty the Queen. So anti all that stuff. But look, if you're going to a working-class guy in Glasgow or Wolverhampton or Leeds, and you say he's a British patriot and his father fought in the war, he's only interested in Churchill, Spitfires, the Battle of Britain, Dunkirk spirit. Whether it's real, whether it's a myth, all our nations are formed on mythology to a certain degree. But that's what our people want. And I gave them that in 2009. And Nick got elected, Andrew Brons got elected, we had 50, 60 councillors later on. And that's the bottom line. Imagine being the Pakistani National Party, but you hate everything about Pakistan. And you're promoting things that India done. Can you imagine it? That is why nationalism never made any headway until I got involved. For 50 years. They never ever get any high office. Ever in 50 years. I get involved for 3 years, change things about, bang, they get elected. I leave. What happened? When I left the BNP, in the October. Basically collapsed in February.
Just a side point. What's your thoughts on the fact that nationalism requires a constant sense of threat? Is that a healthy way to live life?
No, and that's this non-Christian. This is this atheistic nationalism. What else can motivate people? What else can motivate? I agree with you.
But we understand.
But if you're a Christian nationalist, you don't need that. You don't need a constant threat.
A constant threat of the other.
Yeah.
A constant threat of the enemy within.
Well, I can tell you a very good story and it'll prove this. But I'm a Christian nationalist, tribalist. I'm a tribalist. I belong to this tribe. I don't need any threat.
Quick one on the term tribal, because Nick also mentions this. I think all human beings are tribalists.
In a general sense.
Yeah, in a general sense, we come from Adam and Eve.
I don't think our brains can, our brains are so simple, we have to simplify it.
It's an innate survival instinct. Yeah. It's an innate survival instinct.
This is my tribe.
Yeah. So Muslims would say there's 3 survival instincts. The innate one is to revere God. Whether you worship him or you replace him with something else, you're going to end up revering something. The procreation instinct, your desire to procreate and intimacy. Yep. And the third one is the survival instinct. Yep. I'm hot, I take clothes off. Yep. I'm cold, I put clothes on. Yep. I'm hungry, I eat. Yep. I want to survive, I'm part of a pack. Now, for the Muslims, there is only really one tribe. And that's the Ummah. Yeah. That's the global Muslim population. A Bangladeshi Hindu, in my eyes, is nothing than an Irish Muslim. He is my brother. My children can marry his children. I can eat his food without questioning has he been slaughtered. He's my brother.
Yeah.
In this life and the next. So that's our tribe. The tribe is the global Muslim population of 1.8 billion. Of course, in reality, with the 57 secular nation states that were born out of European colonialism, most of them, their very existence kind of goes against that concept.
Of course.
But the core roots, Muslim, would you say that we're kind of pan-Islamic, pan-Ummatic?
Yes.
By default?
Yes.
Irrespective of our leaders, irrespective of our governments, irrespective of regimes.
Well, I think that's what you genuinely think.
Yeah.
I don't think it works out that in reality.
No, but in reality, if we're talking about governments,
Yeah.
yes. If we're talking about the Muslim laity, you would very rarely find him or her prioritizing race, ethnicity, country or nation before religion. They may do so in certain contexts, but the religion always comes first.
I think that's the same with us, but I think because of this nationalism that we have inherently built in Protestantism, nationalism inherently built in it, this is my tribe, and it's fine, and it's not necessarily against anybody else. We have a village of another tribe, the Irish people, 4 miles from here.
Can a Catholic be a part of your tribe?
No.
Can a Jehovah's Witness be a part of your tribe? So it's only Protestants?
No, only Protestants. Of their bloodline.
Okay.
You can't be from Donegal, Irish, or from Kerry and be part of your tribe, even if you're a Protestant.
What about an
It's still be difficult.
What about an Anglican Protestant?
You're pushing it. We have an Anglican church in the town here,
Yeah.
but I'm a Scot, so, of course they are. I mean, we've got the Ontrol up there, there's 5 lodges in it, and there's quite a lot of people of the English bloodline, and Anglicans, and Baptists, and Presbyterians, and things like that. But this is our tribe, and, 4 mile up the road, there's the Irish tribe. I can go up there for a cup of tea, go up there for a bar lunch, and no problem at
Do you
all.
believe the other groups will make it to heaven?
I think here's the strange thing. Again, the election, the doctrine of election. I keep telling people when I preach this regular, people are in for an awful shock when they get to heaven. Because they'll find out that God is neither Catholic, Presbyterian, Baptist, or anything else. So people are all these people who subdivide in Christianity, they're in for an awful shock. Because God is no respecter of persons. It's as simple as that. He's no respecter of persons. So people need to lighten up a wee bit. I think denominationalism is a real danger, but also a real strength. You think, how can that be? It's an oxymoron. No. Because, for example, the Catholics often think Protestants are very weak because we subdivide all the time. No, because the natural progression of man is 70 years. That's what God has given us to live. And anything after 70 years, you find this in the business world. The grandfather starts the business, the father expands it, the son stabilises it, the grandson destroys it. Right? 70 years. Churches are the same. And you'll find if you study church history, after about 70 years, even the best, most fervent church starts going to the dogs.
What is that? Nick said the same thing.
It's because we're built. God has said we'll live 70 years. We'll live 70. So the natural survival of anything.
Now, but I've heard this argument made by a few, but I'm just wondering, why is that unique to Christianity?
I don't think it is. I think it's unique anywhere. The good thing about us is we can split. We can split. The Catholics say that's a weakness. No, because look at the state of their church. Look how it ended up. Indulgences and crazy stuff. Where in this town, we have a brand new hardline Presbyterian church recently built. Why? Because some of the other churches went a bit liberal. So they went right out, bang. Now in 70 years' time, that church might go liberal. And the people just walk away and they'll build another one. And it keeps it fresh. It keeps it rejuvenating. So you're not changing the faith. You're just making sure it's rejuvenated all the time. And I see it even in Islam. I do. I see it in Islam.
No. Let me just come back to you with that. Why is that experience projected on? Why do Christians and Europeans project that to Islam and Muslims? Because we didn't have such bitter wars. We had wars. We had power struggles. We had all of that. No one's disputing that. But the type of religious wars and civil wars that Europe had, there is nothing like it in this.
No, horrific. They were horrific. Yeah. And I think we've got to temper them. And although the interview may say he's a very ferocious Protestant, he's anti-Catholic, he's anti-Orthodox, I'm not. Because I've seen the damage and the destruction to everything and to people's souls that these internecine wars can create. And I think we have to do everything. I mean, I think you have to actually even be prepared to die to keep peace.
Because those things didn't happen in the Islamic world.
I'm not so sure. I mean, you see the thing about the Shia, the Sunni, and Ali Hussein, and this kind of stuff.
Okay, look, the Sunni Shia thing is very easily explained. This was a political difference that became a theological movement. But in terms of Islamic civilization, from the time the Prophet...
I think that's the same with our religious wars.
Jim, look, the wars that Europe experienced, to the extent where one could argue, and some historians have said this, that one of the motivators behind the crusade when Pope Urban II rolled was to actually, hey guys, can we just stop fighting each other now? The heathen infidels have taken...
Common enemy, yeah.
Common enemy. Yeah, the Mohammedans have come, the Saracens have come, the Seljuks have come, and they're in the Holy Land. Get your act together and let's refocus. Yeah. And Europe always used to come back to these bitter civil wars amongst the European kings.
Yeah.
If you look into Islam, yes, there were power struggles, but not so much grounded in the kind of religious schisms, as well as the kind of internal fights within a very small continent.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always been a problem. I think it always will be a problem because, like, for example, now this insane hatred that we see, we've seen even since the BNP days against Muslims. I just seen a thing there when you were setting up. I seen a thing, this guy was on Twitter there saying, look at these, they're jihadis, they're all whipping themselves in their frenzy attack. And there was the Shias, they all slapped themselves.
Free minority.
And they don't do this in their own countries. Well, the guy was looking at Karbala.
In Iraq.
In Iraq. The Shia shrine.
Yeah.
But this is idiocy. But when
Paul Golding does that a lot.
No, it's
he'll take the most randomest clips.
I know, it's bizarre.
From somewhere and be like, look what's happening in England. And sometimes it's not even in England.
Bizarre. But this is the problem. And it's secularism, even back then. So a lot of these leaders, European leaders, they were not real Christians. They were secular. They went secular. And everyone was motivated by politics. And of course, then we were under the Church of Rome. And Rome is the very epicenter of politics. And if you look at all these wars between the Christian kingdoms, it was nearly all power playing by Rome. That's another reason for the Reformation. It was almost always power playing by Rome, because Rome was a political entity. It was just an extension of the Roman Empire. But I do think it's unfair. And, go back to that lineage, going into the BNP and doing all that stuff. Well, I'm counting something in there, which is a lead on to this, which was very strange. BNP, but Matt Collett, I don't know if you know him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's a big noise now on the right. Nietzschean, pencil neck. They all play games. I mean, grown men playing these computer games to me is ridiculous. Anyway, people would say to me, when did you become a nationalist? Well, it's problematic for me being an island because nationalists are normally the other side. But I know what it meant. When did you become a patriot? And the question was bizarre. It made no sense to me. I've never been asked in my life because it made no sense. And on my mother's knee, in fact, on my mother's milk, the songs of revolution, the anti-English songs that we're not supposed, because we're supposed to be these great Ulster Unionists, but we sing songs of Wallace and Bruce and rising up against the English and the other songs, the Protestant.
Do you feel conflicted?
Of course. Being an Ulster Protestant is a very conflicted state of affairs. But I learned that on my mother's knee, so there was never a time that I wasn't. There was never a time I wasn't a patriot. No, there was a time I wasn't a Christian. Different. But I was dragged to church from no age. But, so I couldn't understand this. When did you become an nationalist? When did you become a patriot? It's not a thing. To me, it wasn't a thing you consciously become. It's what you are. And if you went out in the street and asked any of these people here, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. If you said, when did you become a unionist or when did you become a patriot? They wouldn't understand the question because it's so ludicrous. We are born into this tribe, into this tradition. That's it. And some people reject it. Very few. And they put green hair and turn homosexual and wander off. That's up to them. Goodbye, good riddance. So these things. But what I did see there was this constant, it's got to be somebody else's fault. And I was invited to speak once at a big concert in, I can't remember, somewhere in London. Huge place, like near Earls Court, somewhere like that. Big place, big hall. And I was with 500 hardcore right-wing National Front, Combat 18, all that mob. And I did this speech for him. And I whipped him up. I said, your jobs are gone. Our women are gone. The empire's gone. You can't walk down the streets at night. It's not safe. Blah, blah, blah. And and they're all going wild. And I said, I have the identity with me today of the person who's running all of these things against us. All these bad things that's happening. I have his picture. Does anybody want to see it? I'm all wild. You imagine all these fake tattooed. I ran in my bag and I took out my shaving mirror and I got out from behind the podium And I walked around the hall and said, there he is. I said, Shane Hall. That's the guy responsible. This is the slow time of abortion for the one-parent families, for the kids that are to a father, for the country falling apart, for the drunkenness, for the violence, for the male speaking up and safe at night. Do you see him? Do you see it? I know around it. I didn't get them too far because they went wild and I had to get out the back door. Hammersmith. I had to flee for my life. I had to flee. Look, I was a young fella then. I was quite slim. I was quick on my feet. First of all, they were shocked. But then they realised, and if they'd have got me, I'd have been killed that day. But it was the truth. Our problems are not... In the National Front days, it was the black. Mosley's day was the Jews. National Front days, it was the blacks. BNP days, the Muslims. Britain First and all that, Tommy Robinson, blah, blah, blah. It's the Muslims, the Muslims, the Muslims, the Muslims, the Muslims. And I tell people, no, listen, I'll be very straight. I'm no friend of Islam. Don't like it. I don't like it one bit. And I don't want any Islam in this country. I would rather there was no Pakistanis, Indians, Hindustanis, Polish people or anybody else in this country, but us, British people. However, if you removed every single Muslim from Britain tomorrow morning, what would the effect be?
You tell me.
It would possibly be worse. Possibly be worse. Because sex education has only been held back in its extreme forms.
We see ourselves as a reminder of God to this godless society.
I think I would agree with you.
I believe
Look at the sex education. I was arrested 20 years ago trying to stop sex education going into schools. The Muslims stopped it because they turned up at a school mob-handed. I totally agree with that. But Paul Golding and Robinson and all that saying this is terrible and because they say it's terrible, white people in Britain who are not Christians don't think for themselves. They say, yeah, how dare they do this? Why aren't you there? Why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you doing it? So it would make no difference. There'd still be abortion, still be drunkenness. There'd still be all of these things going on if there wasn't one single solitary Muslim in this country or black person. And the problems with us, we are the people who walked away from God.
So why do you want us ideally out of the country?
Well, I'm very tribal. I'm tribal. I don't believe people should be here. I think you could stretch it to North Europeans. I think you could. You could stretch it to North Europeans. We're much cousins. You know, I'm part German, part Swede, part Danish. You could stretch it to North Europeans. But it's just the same as if 1 million Brits turned up in Bangladesh. They've no business being there.
Well, they turned up there anyway, didn't they?
Of course.
They end up colonising the whole thing.
Calling it, but they're out, they're gone, and I don't agree with colonisation, and I don't think it's right.
It's convenient to leave once you've looted and rinsed and raped.
Oh, absolutely.
And the crown jewel.
That's the problem. But what are we doing now? What are we doing now with Bangladesh and Kenya and all these places? We're still doing it. We're taking their young educated doctors. We're taking their young educated engineers and software engineers. And you go to Silicon Valley in America, there's nobody there from America. It's all Indians. We're now doing... Our imperialism now is human imperialism, is human trafficking. We're stealing all these people from these countries. And let me tell you, the middle class will say, oh, we're such an enriched community I live in. Really? You look at all the middle class people and the government people, they don't live in enriched communities. They live out in Hertfordshire, or they live down in Surrey, and they live out in South Kent. They don't live in mixed communities. So it's nonsense. People like me are honest. I don't want to see my country full of brown faces. Period. But they say, oh no, that's racist. Where do they live? They've got the money to go and live in their own counties.
So let me ask you this. What about brown and black Christians?
Very difficult question.
Do you consider them your brothers?
Oh, absolutely. And I believe in a kind of concept like Uma. We believe in the ecclesia, the church. The church is the church. Everybody's in it who are Christians. But again, I'm a nationalist. I would like to see black people being allowed and being facilitated to live in their own countries.
But why won't you give them a home and a safe place?
Because there's no...
They're Christian brothers. Forget about Muslims. They're Christian
brothers. There's very few black Christians have to flee the country. It's economic. And that's basically based on the old, what's happened to them and what's went on in their countries by exploitation, by imperialism. So we should help them. We should help them at point.
So you acknowledge that the economic migrants that are coming, there is an element of the fact that their countries are socioeconomically in tatters due to very recent history.
Oh, of course.
So hence there is a mindset of entitlement. There is
warfare. Look at the Afghans coming here and these people. And the Iraqis. The West killed 1 million people for weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. We invaded Afghan because Saudi Arabians blew up the Twin Towers and we killed 500,000 there. Then we've killed 500,000, 750,000 in Syria because a democratically elected leader wouldn't play ball with the West Atlanticists and chose to go down a Russian route. We have the same in Ukraine because Ukraine went to the West and were arming themselves, pointing missiles at Russia, and Russia objected, heaven forbid. All these wars, all these people wandering about. But yes, I understand all of that, but I still cannot risk my grandchildren's future because our country has been flooded by people who are not culturally the same as us, not religiously the same as us, and changing the very fabric and outlook of 1,000 years or 5,000 years of my people's existence. That's crazy.
But how do you reconcile that with Vikings and Normans and Saxons and Britons and Celts?
You could hardly get a cigarette paper between us, to be honest. You couldn't get a cigarette paper between us. That's the reality. Even though I like to pretend sometimes that we are so different from the Irish, it's like they're space people. They're not. They're our cousins. And genetically, if you take... Well, I'm part German.
I get... Don't agree. I get that you want the country, your land, your region, the land, the island, the isles to remain white. Is that what it is? White. Not necessarily Christian.
Oh, no. No. Christian's number one for me.
So who's better?
White Christian.
So who's better in your eyes? A black Christian or a white atheist? A white atheist patriot.
Black Christian.
But you'd rather have the white atheist patriot in your country, but let the black African Christian.
No, this is where I get a bit funky because people say to me, our people. Who are my people? I'll tell you who my people are. White Christians.
Okay.
Underline.
But let's move out of Northern Ireland. Let's move out of Belfast. Let's go over to
England.
Same
in England.
There's barely any Christians there, Jim.
Not my problem. Not my problem. It's all down to God.
Okay, but Christianity has been statistically proven to be on a nosedive in the UK, generally speaking, right? In terms of numbers, people who identify as it, there's only two that are on the rise: atheism and Islam.
Yeah,
right. There is a massive decline in Christianity in terms of outward practice, outward identification, in many aspects. Now, I get that Northern Ireland is very different because it's
very strange place. Yeah,
it's refreshing in one aspect, but it's also sad. It's sad because of what's happened over the course of history. But it's refreshing because you get to see people who are actually proud of their Christian faith. You can actually speak about
pain has kept us pure. Pain has kept us pure. The English need pain.
But I still want to understand, why would you rather have 1,000 black African Christians or 1,000 white atheist patriots?
Well, if you're talking about thousands, it's an easy concept. If you're talking about millions, it's not so easy then. It's not so easy. It's difficult. But remember, Christianity's not in bad a state as you think. 1.1 million people attend every single football match in England every week. That's all the leagues, right down to the Conference League. All of them. 1.1 million people attend them. There's 5 million people still found in church weekly. 5 million. That's the last statistics from about 2 years ago.
Increasing number of churches are becoming derelict.
Of course they are, because there's too many. I mean, there's too. I grew up in a town with 11 Presbyterian churches because of that subdivision thing. No need for it. Ridiculous. But a lot of the churches now, the Church of England is in huge decline. I mean, you're talking about from 20 years, they've got an 85% decline. No wonder. You've got Justin Welby, who's not particularly sure he believes in God. You've got another guy, the Archbishop, there was in Durham a few years ago, who said the resurrection was a juggling, a conjuring trick with a bag of bones, and then York Minster was hit by lightning. No wonder people don't go there. But there are new churches. I'll show you before you leave. There's a brand new church in this town, huge, with a full Sunday school complement built next to it. 4 miles away in my own personal village, we have another brand new church with a huge minister's house and Sunday school and all the rest of it. So churches are growing. But I worry that the churches that grow in England are these Pentecostal happy-clappy things. I've got to tell you, I have serious doubts that these people are even Christian.
How many white Europeans do you believe actually believe that Christianity is a holistic, comprehensive worldview that has the answer for all of man's solution?
I don't think it's any less than it was 500 years ago. And this is, I was talking with Jerry Francis about this. Of the Victorian age, it was, you had to go to church, or else you wouldn't have a job on Monday. People would think about, well, he's weird, and you wouldn't have a job. And some of the churches here were built by the local mill owner. When you didn't go to church, you didn't have a job. So I think there's always been a remnant. God has always had a certain percentage of humanity that follow him. I think now it's much easier to see them. It's much easier now because it's good because all the falsehoods have been stripped away in England. And I would say your particular religion will go through, the longer you stay in this country under these Western influences, you'll start seeing it yourself.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Why, I don't understand why Muslims from the subcontinent would want to stay in this, I mean, wretched, abortion-ridden, homosexual-ridden cesspit. Why would you want to be here?
So 2 counters to that. Number one, 3rd and 4th generation Muslims like me, my father who came with his paternal uncle in the 60s upon invitation. I know you may not agree with the concept of invitation, but they were.
Yeah.
They were told by the British High Commission that there's job opportunities for you here. We need you guys here. You fought for our wars. We need to rebuild this country. Yeah. My grandfather came for no other reason except to make money.
Yeah, of course.
And to send it back to his family to rebuild the poor villages.
Of course.
Yeah. Once he came here, he realized, okay, things are hard. People look at us funny. They call us names. They might attack us when they're pissed up a bit. But you know what? The money's not bad here. Let's see how it goes for the next 5-10 years. They have more children. Those children go to school. They become, to some extent, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, British to some extent.
No, British is a social construct, so you could be British and brown.
Yeah, so
Can be English.
Yeah, I know, Nick said the same thing. There were certain cultural aspects which they adopted, and there were certain aspects which they had to preserve as part of their own identity. Look, if there was somewhere for us to migrate safely, rest assured Muslims would. I said the same to Nick. It is not as easy as packing up and going. Number one, we have to first talk about, that conversation at least has to be had about reparations, about a payment package for us to leave.
We're paying everybody, sure. We're responsible for it. The first slaves in America were Scots Presbyterian prisoners and Irish Catholics, but now we've to pay for the black people.
Yeah. So we need to first understand why we're here in the first place, right? We're here in the first place, and by we, I'm talking about South Asians, Muslims of immigrant descent from the former colonies, right? Many of our forefathers fought for Britain's colonial wars.
Of course, yes, I know that, yes.
I don't think many of them should have, but they've done it under duress. They've done it under the hope of getting independence. They've done it for many reasons, right? They've done it for a stipend. The reasons vary.
Yeah, of course.
But the point of the matter is, the great in Britain, many of our forefathers contribute towards that. That was after our lands were rinsed, looted, right? And everything was done, dusted, colonized, lines drawn.
But as I say, the Irish, you got things in return. You got nice straight roads, you got nice cities, nice towns, nice harbours, nice reservoirs,
what was the
running water,
do you know
hospitals.
Come on.
You
Do you know
know.
this? India, under the Mughals, was a vast civilization, had one of the largest GDPs of the time. There's this wrong misconception that when the Europeans arrived, there was a bunch of uncivilized heathens.
Oh no, I know the history of Clive of India because Nick used to live next to his castle.
Yeah,
Clive of India was a rascal, to say the least. I know these things, but
Islamic civilization.
I think repatriation and compensation is all nonsense. I mean, I do think it's utter nonsense.
So why should we leave then?
I don't know why you want to live here.
No. Eventually, we're realizing.
I don't know why you'd want to live in this place.
Many Muslims are realizing that the situation is becoming so bad that we're going to have to start making plan Bs and Cs.
Listen, even Christians. We left this country and went to America.
Yeah.
If there's an Ulster Folk Museum, Omagh, and it shows you the hundreds of thousands of Ulster Scots before the Irish left.
Yeah.
We left this country because it was an evil place. It's just like the Pilgrim Fathers. We said, we don't want to live in this evil generation. We left. There is nowhere else to go to now. So I get it. There's nowhere else for us to go now.
Let me tell you a conversation that's taking place. So there are still people coming from the subcontinent and other parts of the Muslim world who are coming to the West, primarily to the UK, to start a better life for whatever reasons. And people are telling them, this is a bad idea.
Don't come.
Don't come here. We've been here for 30, 40 years.
I'm saying that in a nice way. Yeah. I don't mean don't come because I don't want to see your face. Yeah. Don't come because
the way
you're going to destroy yourself.
Yeah, the way society is heading.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so we are telling our brethren who are still planning to come as economic migrants and for other reasons that, look, guys, it's not as great as you think. And you know what? You may enjoy the money now, but 2 or 3 generations down the line, expect some of us to become atheists, homosexuals, absolute godless closet liberals. And expect
abortions
that.
and the daughters and all.
Expect that, because at the end of the day, if you're a minority living amongst the majority, whether the majority will eventually, their values, their way of life, their norms will rub off on you.
Of course it does.
That said, there is still a constituency of Muslims who believe that for now, Britain is still the safest place to practice our faith. I'll tell you why. Because if you look at the Muslim world, Jim, they're all despots. They're all tyrannical regimes. These are guys who have colluded with Western agencies, have carried out rendition torture programs, were complicit in war on terror. CIA is very well immersed into the state apparatuses of countries like, whether it be Turkey, whether it be Pakistan, whether it be Egypt, whether it be, and let's not even go into the Gulf countries, right? So when people tell us, go back to your countries, go back to your motherlands, go back to the Muslim world, what we're saying is that because of the constant meddling and interference of Western agencies, it's still not safe there. It's still not safe there. Also, because of the brain drain, because of the economic drainage outside of the Gulf, socioeconomically, it doesn't make sense for us to move there. However, we've reached a point in 2023 where Muslims are, believe it or not, moving to Turkey, moving to Malaysia, reinvesting in Pakistan.
I've seen some of it. Because especially Malaysia.
Yeah.
Listen, I can sympathise with all of those things. Of course, I can sympathise with all of it. And I would say if there was a new America discovered, I think you would find the Christians from Northern Ireland and England and Scotland emptying. We'd be gone. Because the rot is set so far in now. And there is no way back. There is no way back. God has got punishment upon this land, and that's the bottom line. Now, we have a theory that the Muslims have been used as the sort of sons of Ishmael as the rod of correction to bring us back to the faith. That might be true. That might be true. I don't know. But when you have 14, this is interesting, 14 million people we've aborted in this country. Now, from 1967, they would have had kids, so it's about 20 million. That correlates exactly with the amount of foreigners that's in this country. So God has replaced the people we killed, our people, our tribe. He's replaced them with the exact same number by the foreigners. So this is again down to us.
Do you think the Muslims are a plague?
I think the problems. I think the die is set now, and I lived in an intercommunal warfare situation. The die is set. The die is set. The worst thing that can happen to the English, and because of no religion, I don't know how they're going to survive it. Polarisation is the only way for survival for the white British. But I don't really care.
What would you do about the 150,000 white British Muslims? White Muslims. What do you do with them? Once we've left and we've scarped and you've paid me to leave, what do you do with these lot?
I don't know. I really don't know. I never thought about them. But the problem is, I'm not really interested in the.
Are they part of your tribe?
Well, bloodline they are. Of course they are. But there's a problem with, I'm not interested. Like people would say, these are our people. Who's our people? I am not interested. I don't go to any rallies. I don't go and speak to people. If people are atheists, well, we don't believe in God, but we just want all he's out. Not interested in you. I would prefer you out to be out. See, when the Pakistanis leave, I hope they take you with them. They are not my people. And these people are tedious. These people are rebelling against God. I'll give you a good example where the die is cast. But assimilation is my greatest fear for my people. Assimilation. So there
same for our people.
Absolutely. So there must be polarisation. Now, luckily, the Irish Catholics, God bless them, in the 1860s, they came up with this Gaelic revival. All nonsense, mainly. But it was good to make them. They played different games. They didn't play soccer. They didn't play cricket. They played GAA and shinty and hurling. And it kept their people separate. And then we had the orange and the marching and the bands, which is a bizarre culture. It kept us separate. And it lasts to this day. And we live in relative peace now. But we're very separate. We need that. But what did the English people do? What did they do? They form the EDL and they march about drunk out their minds with cheap lager, shouting and bawling. Now, I don't know if you remember the case of the Lee Rigby court case. When he was being sentenced, the BNP turned up with a gallows and hang them, and there was EDL there was the Britain First here, there was somebody else there, all hating each other's guts and fighting. Well, that day I seen a terrible thing happen. There was a Muslim woman, full burqa, full shebang, I don't know what you call it, all the black,
niqab,
the whole thing, where kids came out. Now, her son was up for some motoring offence. Nothing to do with Lee Rigby. Nothing to do with the killers of Lee Rigby. And all these baldy skinheads broke through the barriers and attacked that woman and her children.
We're bastards.
Total, absolute scum of the earth. Now, I've got to say it, and to be fair to some of it, I was with Britain First then. we intervened and got wired in. Because what animals? And I said to these guys, where are you with the Muslim rape gangs? Why are you here in Rotherham? Hunting down them?
Okay, let me ask you something, Jim, yeah? I'll ask this to Nick. Why do you identify them as Muslim rape gangs?
Because from our experience of what we've seen and what the courts have shown and the sheer numbers going through the courts.
But why Muslim?
Because they are, the Pakistanis, they're Muslim.
Okay, but why is that an identifying factor to describe their crime?
I suppose you could leave it out and just call it Pakistani rape gangs, but it happened to be Muslim, so why not include it?
Let me explain to you why.
Why wouldn't you?
So when you attribute Muslim to a crime of that nature, or any crime for that matter, what that basically lets off, or what you're saying is that the crimes that they have committed is linked to the religion.
Well, some people would argue with that, but it's like here, the UVF come from a Protestant background. Very few of the UVF are actually Protestants.
Jim, if we had Sharia law, we'd deal with these people far better than any Christian law would.
Of course, but
we would deal with
you do have Sharia law. There's many parts of England where you practice Sharia law.
Oh, marriage laws, come on.
Yeah.
Marriage laws, civil laws. We're not chopping hands and whipping and lashing.
No, but here, for example, even though we the two communities are at loggerheads here, we still have lines of communication between each other. So, for example, say a load of mad Catholics in the Falls Road were going about raping Protestant women. What would happen in reality? Not in theology, theoretical. In reality, one of our people would contact one of the IRA men and say, listen, these guys are doing this.
Sort it out.
Sort it out. Yeah. We don't want to step on your toes. Well, you've got a week. You sort it out. Or then we'll move and we'll sort it out. Mm. And vice versa. They would do the same. As a lot of you Protestants are doing this. You get it fixed or we'll deal with it. And that's what should have happened in England. But England is no community. The white people have no community. Now, if they were strong and tough, and you can only do this from a position of strength. We are both strong in this. Our communities are strong here, so we respect each other. English people should have been able to go to Rotherham leaders in the Muslim community, the imams, and say, look, we need a meeting with you. There's a problem. Here's the name of all these taxi drivers and these shop owners who are committing these heinous crimes against the girls. We know it's them. You know it's them.
That's okay. So what you
just deal with it.
Yeah,
deal with it. We'll deal with it.
So what you described there, Jim, that's fine. But the issue that the Muslim community has is that with the dog whistle politics, the media coverage, that all of a sudden what you're feeding the British public masses, on top of the fact that we're terrorists, fifth column, can't be trusted, looking to hoist the black flag on Downing Street, and all of this stuff. So on top of that, we're
rapists. I understand it. I understand it.
And then there's this flex, this message that these are basically Mohammedans who are basically ravaging and savaging our women because they believe in X, Y, and Z about slave girls and concubines. This is nonsense.
Well, that's why I don't do the dog whistle, and that's why I left Britain first.
Yeah,
we never covered that, but I started Britain first. And I started Britain first to try and give them a Northern Ireland experience, i.e. discipline.
So how did it end up invading mosques?
Well, exactly.
And harassing elderly worship.
Exactly. When I went into Britain first, the whole idea was putting them into companies. You know, like whatever you UVF, UDA, militaristic, that you follow orders, there's strict rules, you get fit, you get healthy, you go to boxing, you clean your act up, you get the Bible. So we gave them battle flags, we gave them Bibles, we started instructing them.
How many of them read the Bible?
It would have been, I would have been better using my time, money and effort with a pack of goats.
How often did Paul read the Bible, are you aware of?
When he was living here, he lived here for a while. He went to church with me because I went to church. And I remember him saying, nobody goes to church anymore. I says, they do here. And he started going to church and he had made some kind of profession of faith. I think, by their fruit you shall know them. But no, the whole Southern English thing, some of the Northern English guys could have been knocked into shape, militaristic. But the Southern English, no. And people don't want to follow rules and follow orders and behave like Christian fighters, not reprobates. Because most of these people came from an EDL background, which was basically undisciplined rabble. And the dog whistling. So I said, this is no good. And, I used to man the phones. And I had death threats from Al-Shabaab and things like that. I know the English guy, Al-Shabaab, he killed eventually. He phoned me up, threatened and all that, and the police were all round because they were bugging the phone. And they knew, when I got home, the police were waiting on me. They said, these are serious death threats. I said, I get them from the IRA, I get them for the UVF. During the Troubles, the IRA did attack a church. They attacked Dartley Church one day, come in, Pentecostal church, machine gun, 3 people dead, maybe 5. They'd done that.
Jada and Paul never came in on a Friday, though.
No, the outcry was terrible. Well, I don't think the idea was to come in and do that. It was a PR stunt, wasn't it?
But the point is, they never rocked up on a Friday.
Well, I think they did once in the London Central Mosque, and it was a bloodbath. Okay. There's a video of people getting fly kicked all over the road. But you don't do it. Look, even at the height of the Troubles, this is a totally product. This is the most un-Catholic village in Ireland, the island of Ireland, this town. There's a Roman Catholic church at the end of the street. There's no fence around it. There's a school that most of the Sinn Féin are going to shut it down because they're commies. We volunteered and put 10 or 12 Protestant children in it to keep the school open. There's never been a fence around that Roman Catholic church. You don't attack or mess about with people's churches.
So what were the conversations like internally?
I told them this is stupid, this is counterproductive, but by that time Paul didn't even know the difference between Shia and Sunni because there was Shia. I said, they're Shias. What are you talking about? They have nothing to do with the Twin Towers or the beheading of the soldier. That was Sunni. This is Shias. They're completely no point. And I thought, this is so ridiculous and so beneath the dignity of what Christians should be involved in. And I bent over backwards and pleaded not to do this. Not because I'm frightened of the Muslim backlash. I'm frightened of nobody. But I'm frightened of what God thinks about things, because God won't protect us and God won't give us strength in a battle if we act immorally and unrighteously and get into other people's places of worship is unrighteous.
Was that your main reason for leaving?
Yeah. I just didn't like
Really,
it.
was it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or were there other things and that was the fun?
No, that was a big reason for me. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. And I didn't like where the whole organisation was going. It was becoming yobbish and un-Christian. And these idiots, these morons that you wouldn't give a job to sweeping the floor around here. I don't want to be associated with people like that. And this constant baiting, dog whistling, the Muslims, because all they were doing is they were doing an extended version of EDL. EDL. That's not what I'm in this for.
They just seemed, Britain First just seemed like a bit more of an organised version of the EDL.
Well, it was only organised because I organised it.
The whole flags, the whole marches.
Yeah, that was me. That was all coming from Ulster.
The more Christian identity as opposed to the more football hooliganism type of flex.
Exactly, but it didn't work.
Okay.
It just didn't stick. It didn't stick. Was that the quality of leadership? Perhaps, and I'm including myself in that.
So your Christian fundamentalism didn't work with the National Front. Did it really work with the BNP?
No.
Did it work with Britain First?
No.
Why is that?
Because people are rebelling against God. Things aren't bad enough yet. Life's been too easy.
Christians have a commitment issue, you know that?
I know that.
They have a commitment issue.
Of course. And it's what is Christianity now? Britain, England,
don't want to commit to
Anglican.
marriage. Don't want to commit to family. Don't want to commit to stay away from vice. Don't want to commit. There's a major commitment issue.
I know, and Anglicanism has always been a weak religion. In Scotland, thankfully, Northern Ireland were.
No, Catholics have got the same issue now.
Everybody's getting the same, even us. It's beginning to creep in here now as well. It's creeping in everywhere. But I think, and I remember when the Troubles were on here, the Catholic churches were still collapsing because of their own problems, and it's a shame. I feel sorry for my Catholic friends. But our churches were bulging and the suicide rate was half of the average in Europe. Now it's double. Yeah. Because when you're living on the edge, and do you remember during the Troubles, every day there was 3 or 4 attempted murders, maybe 1 murder, 2 or 3 shootings. In the 70s, it was hundreds per day. It was a real civil war, real proper.
Of course, yeah.
So when you're going to your bed at night, you don't know if you're going to see the morning, or you don't know what one of your family, your loved ones are going to be dead in the morning. I'll tell you, it sharpens the mind. And the trouble with British people, white people in Britain, they thought it too easy for too long. And for years they blamed the Jews, the blacks, the Muslims. You're the latest, but if somebody else, it'll be somebody else's turn soon. Without looking in the mirror and saying, here's the problem. The problem's me. The problem is me. I need to clean my act up. I need to get my act together. The amount of people that contact me say, the Muslims are taking over my town, what do I do about it? I say, you married?
What are they taking over?
My town. So they're always taking over somebody's town. I says, okay. Are you married? Yep. How many kids you got? None. Yeah. All right, I wonder why the Muslims are getting these houses then. If you had 10 kids, they wouldn't be taking over anything. It's nonsense. I get frustrated every day because people come on to me every day and say, what are we going to do about that? I'm saying, well, hold on, Mr. Super Patriot 101. You don't even use your real name. You're a coward. You're a snivelling wretch, a coward. Are you a Christian? No. What do I want to help you for then? What do I want to help you for?
We follow each other on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
And you see how sometimes I try to hold a mirror to your patriots. Do you see some of my tweets?
Yeah, you see them. They're quite provocative sometimes.
Just get married, have kids, make your women behave modestly and
That's our message.
And the way Mother Mary behaved and how we know of her. Have more children, and then you'll see life will start fixing up.
Absolutely.
Cut down on the alcohol, give socializing a break in terms of partying and all that kind of stuff. Become serious, become healthy and fit, and become God conscious.
Yeah. This is your message. Get married, have children, make sure your wife stays in the house in Africa. Do not allow your wife out to work at all. Don't do it. And you will bring up a good, healthy family and bring up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And guess what? Britain, all of a sudden, within a generation, will be a very different place. But these people don't want to do that.
Now, Muslims would say that we are still holding down these values in the absence of a civilization. So we don't have a caliphate. We don't have a central authority. Remember, you said, like Catholics, you guys, you're quite universalist and that kind of stuff. We don't have a central leadership for 1,000 years plus, irrespective of all faults and shortcomings. We did have. We had the Umayyads, we had the Abbasids, we had the Ottomans, we had the Seljuks, we had, and obviously before that, the Rashidun Caliphate of the four companions of the Prophet. We've had a civilizational paradigm for over 1,000 years. We've not had that for the last 100, 150 years, right? Given that massive balance of power shift, we're still holding it down. In the sense that you would have thought that we would have abandoned our religion and our values within 100 years in the absence of a civilizational push. When I say civilization, I'm talking about a religious authority who the Muslims have accepted as as God's vice regent on earth, right? We don't have that. We want that. We'd love that, and it will come.
Well, Calvinists don't have that. We don't want it.
Okay, well, we want
we don't have any central point.
Okay, because we believe the normative Sunni position. It doesn't matter if you're Deobandi, it doesn't matter if you're Wahhabi, Salafi, Muslim Brotherhood, a Sufi. It doesn't matter what you are. A Sunni traditionalist, at his core, is pan-Islamic, which means borders don't really matter to us.
But you still want some kind of leadership role thing.
Because we need to ensure that God's law is implemented on earth. How do you have
Be careful, the Catholics are one of them. He's called the Pope and he's blessing gay marriages now.
But that's the problem.
Be careful.
And that is a European issue, because we've never had that. We've never had in the 1,000 years where a Khalifa or a Sultan or a Grand Mufti has made the haram halal, meaning the forbidden.
You're maybe lucky not having that in place now, because it might go like that. Or maybe the CIA would make him that way.
The point is, the reason why we would want an Islamic civilization, because Muslims don't just believe in the private implementation of God's law. It's for the private, it's for the public. It's to shape society, it's to mold society, it's to influence society to be more God conscious. It's one thing saying, oh, in my house I'll implement Sharia, but as soon as I'm out there, I'm talking about in the Islamic world. I'm not talking about in Western capitals. Before people start thinking, oh, the good Lord, that's what they want. No, we're talking about the Muslim world. In the Muslim world where there was Sharia, where there has been Sharia, where there was an Islamic civilization, we want a society which reflects our morals and values. How hypocritical and unjust would it be to God to say that his laws are sufficient in the home but insufficient outside? So I think that's what it is for the Muslims. We don't have that at the moment. I believe if and when that comes, I believe you will see a mass exodus of Muslims leaving.
I think you're right. And listen, the pain for me at the moment in this country, and it is a problem, and it's a problem with white nationalists. It's like if you had cancer and the doctor said, "Yeah, I can give you this pill will absolutely cure you of your cancer," and they won't take it. Christianity, the true faith, found only in Jesus Christ. None of these men-made things and popes and prelates and archbishops of Canterbury. I'm talking about raw Christianity, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, the Saviour. That will cure your problems. And they say, no, they won't take it. Then they come to me as some kind of right-wing leader. What am I supposed to do with these people? What do I want to do with these people? I don't want to do anything with these people. These are not my people. They might be the same skin tone as me, but they're not my people, because you see this stupidity. Oh, the Muslims cover their women up. But our women are out on a Friday night with a microskirt with a backside literally showing their boobs hanging out. That yes, they think this is some victory for the white British people. This is a disgrace. My mother would not leave the house without a headscarf. My grandmother would not leave without a headscarf and a shawl right round her. She's like one of these women you see in Gaza, you know what I mean, with the shawl. This is modesty. But we're in a perverted thing now where you get people like Tommy Robinson and people like him promoting, yeah, well, look at our women, they can do what they want. Oh, really? They can be on TikTok, they can be on OnlyFans, they can be porn stars and all the rest of it. And this is some sort of, we are superior to the Muslims because our women can take all their clothes off in public. No, thank you.
Championing degeneracy.
It's degeneracy. And that's what's wrong with Britain. And I say to you guys, you don't want that. You need to go and get married to have kids while you're going down to a nightclub and having sex with 3 or 4 different women every week. Well, it's not the Muslims that's destroying this country. You's destroying the country. You and your like are destroying this country. There only is 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, million Muslims in the country. There's 50 million so-called white British people. And most of them are pigs. Most of them are scum. Most of them are godless beasts, no better. And they need to turn back to God. And God will not help this country. God will not help this country unless these people repent, get on their knees, get back to God, and then all of a sudden they'll find the Muslims aren't that big a problem. Neither are the blacks, neither is anything else, because the whole country will be different. Mm-hmm. And the immigration policies will be tightened up. And there won't be these people flooding in. But there's one point, I'll give you an example.
Will the war stop?
The wars, no. They're a different thing. But look, people are going mad.
No, the waging of the wars in the Muslim world.
We would hope. Of course
the looting of our resources.
Of course they would.
The military bases.
Of course they would. Who's behind these wars in the Middle East? Who really? You know who's behind them. Now, we don't know if we can say this, but I'm going to say it. Israel's behind most of the wars. Israel and their agencies are behind most of the wars. Even Ukraine. The Ukraine are a country of neo-Nazis who have a Jewish prime minister. The right sector got rid of a democratically elected Orthodox Christian prime minister and replaced him before Zelensky with a Jewish guy. What is going on? The war in Iraq, that was all about Israel's interests. The war in Syria was absolutely, Syria were even bombing Christian targets in there. Christian targets were getting bombed. Israel had fueled hospitals, actually given medical assistance to the Al-Nusra and the ISIS fighters. People don't know this.
I must say this about the Syrian revolution because it is a very sensitive topic for the Muslims. Yeah. I need to make it abundantly clear that Bashar al-Assad is not popular amongst Sunni Muslims.
Of course.
So there's 2 distinctions to be made. There is no doubt that the war in Syria, the revolution in Syria, was most certainly and very quickly manipulated by external powers and their proxies within the region. But the uprising itself was grassroots. The uprising itself was from the Sunni majority who felt suffocated and needed reforms in the country. And the Arab Spring was happening. Now, there's a whole debate about how much Western CIA
the CIA Arab Spring, that one.
Yeah. So that's one argument. But the way the vast majority of Sunni Muslims would still position it is that what happened, meaning people took to the streets for their rights, for wherever justice they were seeking from despotic rulers that were basically Western agents. Mubarak was, Ben Ali was, Abdullah was of Yemen. Okay, fine.
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam was, depending on what era you're looking at.
Exactly,
yeah, he fought the Iranians for 8 years at the behest of the West. So we have to accept that the people taken to the streets was not done by the CIA or any other external powers. How things were manipulated thereafter, for sure. So this concept that Bashar is some popular axis of resistance leader amongst the Muslims, he isn't. He's actually still a very despised figure.
I know that, but that's the problem. So if this country get back to Christianity, real Christianity, I don't think we'd have all these problems in the world, because for a start, we would not be supporting Israel. We would not be supporting Israel. Now, I know you're going to see other friends who are a wee bit different, but in this side of the city, in this side of the town, in this side of the Northern Ireland, most Protestants, mainly through default, if the Catholics like Palestine, we must hate them and we must like Israel. But even theologically, a lot of church people, mainly Baptists, Pentecostals, people like that, they support Israel because of this dispensationalism. I must give you a book on it. I wrote a book on it because of this false narrative. But dispensationalism was promoted by a Jewish businessmen's club to get into the Protestant churches. So this is where this nonsense comes from. But it's very, right at the moment, I'm one of the most unpopular people amongst my own people here in Northern Ireland. I'm very unpopular. I've had death threats, serious death threats from people People tell me don't come to a certain part of Belfast, I won't be welcome, because I've called out Israel and their outrageous behaviour. And I've gone to my Twitter and I've got all these imbecile British, so-called British nationalists. I couldn't spell it. You know, I'm a British nationalist. I'm a British patriot. I'm a British Christian. And one of the main traits, I believe, of Christians and British people is decency and a sense of fair play. And when a state, look, what terrorists do, terrorists do. Terrorists are crazy. Terrorists done crazy things in this country. But, you know, remember the Shankill bomb when the IRA put a bomb off in a fish shop on a Saturday, killed 9 innocent, totally innocent people. Did we then demand the British government carpet bomb the Falls Road and kill all those Roman Catholics? If the British would have done it, we wouldn't have supported that. I'm telling you, even though they're our sworn enemy, we would not have supported that. We would have been in there trying to protect those people, even though they're our historical enemy. This is outrageous. And what's happening in Gaza, and for British right-wing people, and I'm going to tell you something, I've actually cried at some of the comments I've seen. I've actually shed tears. Thinking, how did a British person become so vicious, so inhuman, so insulated from human feeling? And then I think, hold on, and I compose myself, and I say to people, excuse me, how many children have you got? None. Usually none. They're godless reprobates who just hate Muslims. They used to hate blacks. Probably a generation ago they hated the Jews, but now it's the way it is. And anything, it's the dog whistling, it's the EDL effect, it's all that stuff, which was all highly paid for by a certain lobby group that have turned the whole British right-wing axis round. Remember, back in the NFF days, Mr. Griffin will tell you, Jade is too young, but if you went to a British right-wing meeting, right-wing, there was certain elements there. It was ferociously anti-Jewish, it was ferociously anti-black, and it was ferociously anti-homosexual. That lasted up until the 2000s. And then EDL appeared. Every EDL rally, this was shocked me. Gay flags, Israel flags. On the stage, black fellas, transvestites, all of that. So now the average right-wing British, so-called British patriot, thinks this is part of being British right-wing. You must just blindly hate Muslims. If they're all getting killed in Gaza, hooray, good, wonderful. You must be tolerant of gay marriage. And you must be pro-immigration, just not Muslims. Because remember, all of these people, all of them are pro-immigration, but not Muslims. And that's all these new leaders, the Velders and all these people. So that's what's happened now. And it's because people have moved away from God. But I read the Twitter feed and I am shocked and ashamed that people have lost the humanity that they can watch what's going on in Gaza. And we're looking at probably 10,000 children at least now dead. We don't know how many is buried under the rubble. It's winter time. Now we're coming up to Christmas. I don't do Christmas, but I understand it. Where do you think, what was the route do you think Jesus and Joseph and that took to flee? Do you remember to flee because they heard about killing everybody?
They'd have to go for long. There's very checkpoints.
And they had to go through Gaza.
Yeah.
They wouldn't get through now. They'd have to go through Gaza. And isn't it interesting and ironic that the same people massacring the children 2,000 years ago are the same people now massacring the very same spot that Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus would have had to take refuge and go through?
Many would regard that as anti-Semitism.
Huh?
Many would regard that as an anti-Semitic take. I'm just telling you. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't understand, Danny. I grew up as an Ulster Protestant, and we're very friendly with the Jews. I grew up with my father being in the Second World War, very anti-Nazi, all the rest of it, and I hate Nazis. And I know one of the reasons I used to get furious when I went to any right-wing meeting, why did they have to keep going on about the Nazis? To hell with the Nazis. They blew up our streets, they killed our people. My father fought them, to hell with the Nazis. But they were all the Jew bashers. And I've always thought, this is tedious. This is tedious. I was quite sympathetic to the Jews. If you go around this town, there's Israeli flags everywhere. So I was always brought up to be sympathetic to the Jews. I never knew much about it, apart from the Holocaust and so on and so forth. But recent years have shown me, with the social media clampdowns, with the double standards then, and then, of course, I've seen how they've operated in the Middle East. And I thought, that's strange. Even attacking Christians in the Middle East. And I thought, this is very odd. And now, all of a sudden, the Gaza. The Gaza thing. I am not anti-Semitic. Let me tell you something. Well, maybe technically I am, because the Semitic people are Arabs. I'm not keen on Arabs. So, I'm equally...
Are you keen on anyone outside
Not really.
of the tribe?
No, not really. I'm xenophobic.
So why did we
I
connect?
don't even like the Belgians.
So why did we connect? What am I doing now?
People of goodwill and good intent, whether you agree with them or you fiercely disagree with them, go on. Listen, I'm friendly with some guys who were IRA operatives. And I see them at the pro-life things now, and we can actually speak to each other as human beings and say, do you remember I was trying to kill you? Yeah, and remember that time I tried to kill you? Yes. And we can deal with each other like that now, because they're devout men and they were very serious. Now, and to me, they're seriously wrong, but they think the same with me. But there's a seriousness about people, and I think that's what I see from you. We don't have to agree. We can never agree with each other.
On this specific issue of Israel occupying Zionist entity and its ongoing crimes is something that's worth discussing.
Absolutely. It has to be discussed. But the thing is, people then will moan. I watch these scenes in Gaza and I cry. I've got to tell you, and I don't really cry much. I never cried when my father died, but this is bringing tears to my eyes because this is so horrific. I don't think people have any idea what's going on. And we're past the point.
We do.
No.
Well, we do. We see it every day.
But we're past the point of no return. Famine and disease, waterborne disease now, is inevitable. We could be looking at 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 human beings dying. And if I was a Muslim, I've got to tell you this in all seriousness, if I was a Muslim, I'd be taking up arms.
The Muslim world wants to.
When I watched the IRA blowing up the War Memorial in Enniskillen, I was a businessman at a factory. I packed in my business, I packed in my house, and I moved to Northern Ireland, and I immediately got involved in the violence. How could you not?
The Muslim world wants to.
Of course.
The Muslim world want to, but there's one thing, I think it was Ariel Sharon. He said the main IDF, the main defenders of Israel are the neighbouring Arab regimes.
This is what I don't understand. I see this. And remember, they've got the Samson plan. If they go, we all go.
Yeah.
But now, I think people like Hamas, they're probably so beyond the pale. And not because of their own fault. I think they've been brutalised to such a state. This is one of the reasons IRA called a ceasefire here. Because IRA brutalised us so much. We don't make good terrorist Protestants. We make good Arabs, but not good terrorists. But Adam,
what's the difference?
There's a huge difference. Military, discipline, big things, sneaking about, blowing people out in the middle of the night. It's not our cup of tea. It's against the way we think.
But the Palestinian fighting factions have elements of that.
Of course. But you see, when Adams, in the 90s, we started getting the upper hand. We were going to cross the border, taking out the people who needed to be taken care of. And Adams seen that, and he knew the 25 years had brutalised my community to such a stage we lost our fear. And they became people we didn't really want to be. And he could see that, and he realised we've created a bit of a monster here. We need to stop this. This needs to go. This needs to stop. And Israel should have seen that 50 years ago with the Palestinian community. They should have seen that their brutality was creating a monster. And that's what they've created. They've created something now that nobody is ever going to put a lid on. And I don't think we've seen even 1% of the blowback that's going to come from this.
From the Muslim position and from the Islamic position, irrespective of what people say publicly, what's politically correct, what's legally allowed, the fact of the matter is the Muslim nation, from Morocco to Indonesia, from Dagestan to Tanzania, will not accept legitimacy of a handspan of Israel.
No, of course not. I can't blame them. I think the whole thing is so despicable, disgusting, and immoral. I told folk yesterday in the live report that I did. I said, we're living through an epoch. We're living through something, and people who live through big events don't realise they're living through a big event until after it. We're living through something now that's changing the very fabric of the Western world, because Israel basically is part of the West. We know that.
Of course.
We're living through something now, because my generation grew up very sympathetic to Israel. Everybody I speak to, even in this town, the old loyalists,
shifting,
I stand with Israel, the old boys. See everybody under 30. I can't tell you on camera what they're saying, but they're saying name Jew. But what I can't understand, who are these people? Shifting, you don't even know half of it, because you live in your own wee community. You have no idea.
Public opinion is shifting generally across Britain.
It's seismic. There's a seismic. You know, I broadcast to mainly Americans. A year ago, if I'd have dared say a word about Israel, there'd have been mass resignations, letters in, everything. I think we've lost one person at the Templars. One person because of our unrelenting attack on Israel's brutality. We've not stopped, not one day. We haven't stopped for 8 weeks. Every day, one person. If I'd have tried that a year ago, all of the Americans would have resigned. But they're looking at this and saying, wow, this isn't right.
But would you say that's more from the perspective, not necessarily humanity and mercy, but more to do with the fact that they're realising that our administration and our policy making isn't actually independent?
They understand that. And real Christians, I mean, remember, Luther's views on the Jewish people are well known. Calvin's well known. John Knox well known.
Jim, you spoke about decency. You spoke about the compassion and the tears that the events in Gaza has brought you to. And, it's commendable to hear, because if people Googled you or Wikid you, think, how can this person resonate with anything happening in the Muslim world? How can he resonate with the people who he's trying to cleanse his continent and his country of? I want to bring the podcast to a close with discussing the Knights Templars International. Now, when you speak to a Muslim who knows any cursory knowledge of the Crusades or Islamic history, the Crusades was a very bloody affair for the Muslims. We lost Jerusalem for nearly 100 years. It was the only time that the Christians took Jerusalem for that 90 or so years, I think, from 1099 until 1187. The Knights Templars were singled out. So I'm just letting you know the Islamic perspective, the Muslim perspective. The Knights Templars are seen as devoutly Christian knights who were more... I don't like using the term religious zealots, because that's not... They wouldn't coin themselves like that. It wouldn't be fair, because one could argue that any devout person is a zealot to some extent. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
But the Knights Templars are kind of seen as the sworn enemies of the Muslims at that time. I say that because Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, may Allah have mercy on his soul, Ameen, when he took Jerusalem in 1187, there was a lot of crusaders that he allowed. He didn't kill them, he didn't massacre them like the Christians did when they came in 1099. Well documented by William of Tyre and others. The Muslims didn't do that to the Christians. But shall I tell you who did get rounded up and killed? The Knights Templars did.
Yeah.
Because the Knights Templars was seen as a fraternity and a movement that was seen at the time from an Islamic perspective, were basically bloodthirsty guys who wanted to cleanse the Holy Land of the infidels who were the Muslims. You are part of Knights Templars International. You have a wide link across Europe. Tell me a bit about the Knights Templars International. How can you sit here and talk about the Palestinians, but at the same time be part of an organization who is believed to be centered around cleansing Europe of Muslim migrants and the Muslim threat and all these kind of things? And I'm referring to activities in the Bulgaria-Turkey border, to name just one of the kind of things. Were you supporting any kind of paramilitary troops in the border?
On the Turco border, for example, there was a militia who was backed by the government. It's ex-servicemen. And this is very strange. In some of the pictures you'll see me and the people I'm standing with, the Bulgarian militia, are Muslims. They're actually Muslims.
Bulgarian Turks.
Bulgarian Turks.
Yeah.
And they were part of the militia, which was mainly Christian. But the job was to stop. That was when the Syrian war was going bad for the Al-Nusra and whatnot. And there was a lot of people, combatants. I don't like the word terrorist, because one man's terrorist and another man's freedom fighter, and I think we need to be careful with that. But a lot of them were coming in through Bulgaria, Turkey, into Bulgaria, and into Europe.
Where was that intelligence coming from, though? That these were Al-Nusra fighters?
No, because we were capturing them. We knew who they were. And we were finding their ID.
Okay.
And at that time...
Were they escaping war? Were they coming to war?
They were just getting out because they were getting mangled at that time. They were getting absolutely hammered. And it was over. So they were coming out. So the main duty of us, now, the militia that we were involved in was a respectable militia. We would capture people. We would keep them captive, no violence, and hand them over to the Bulgarian authorities who would then process them. There was other militias there, very famous people in the West, and people like the Generation Identity were hanging about with them. They were killing people. Not just killing the Al-Nusra people. They were killing anybody and raping people. So even economic migrants coming in, they were being robbed and raped and massacred and murdered. And we were the enemy of that militia. So part of our job wasn't just to capture Al-Nusra and terrorists.
You had no hand in that?
No, we were the opposite. The militia that we were involved in, one of our main tasks was to keep this other gangster criminal militia out the scene, out the theatre, to get them out. And anybody who was injured, there was nobody injured. Anybody, Muslim people coming in, was injured. Never. But we injured a lot of them people, those criminals. Because they were gangsters, they were criminals who were interested in stealing and robbing and raping and so on and so forth. And they had widespread support for the West. You know, that was the days when you had Facebook and all that, and everybody was supporting these people. We were saying, don't support these people. These are bad, bad, bad people. So probably half of our time was manning the border to keep the integrity of the border. And half the time was fighting off the criminal, brutal, savage, fake militias who had no government approval because they were criminals and gangsters and money makers. So there was no violence used against anybody, including some of the people who'd been combatants in the Syrian war. No violence at all. Now, occasionally we were fired at by these people, but they knew it was a hopeless situation. So they would normally give themselves up. They knew it's Europe. Throw your ID away. They're going to get processed. They're in the EU. Bob's your uncle. They're going to end up in Dusseldorf or Frankfurt in a couple of weeks anyway. So it was a pointless exercise. But we did do that, but we didn't supply. We supplied those people with drones to monitor, because you're in dense forest and it's quite dangerous. We supplied drones and we supplied bulletproof vests, which came from the Metropolitan Police. We bought them at auction. They were very unhappy. And we supplied these kind of things. We didn't supply anything offensive, neither do we. We're not the knights of 900 years ago. We don't really believe in any offensive action anymore.
What was your actual role in these activities?
Well, basically, we were passengers, because look at I'm getting old, and we were passengers. We took out on a couple of patrols.
Did you resettle in Budapest?
Oh, this was Bulgaria.
Bulgaria. But were the activities happening from Budapest? Or
No. This was Bulgarians, totally separate.
Okay.
And they all don't get on with each other.
Okay,
European nonsense.
Yeah.
But that was basically the thing in that. And we were just giving them the bulletproof vests and drones and things like that to make their life a bit easier and make it more professional. But that was them. There were some Serbs involved in the Bulgarian thing. But the Budapest was a different thing. We had a fantastic headquarters there. Still have. Just I'm banned. But I like Budapest. I like the people. I like the Hungarians. And, the Hun element. There's very few Huns live in Hungary now. They're all dead. Killed by the retreating Ottoman armies, I may add. Yeah. So there was a few depopulation there. So they brought in Germans and Swabians. And Northern Hungary is Calvinist. Same religion as me. So Northern Hungary is Calvinist. And this is a strange thing. The Calvinists actually sided with the Ottomans against the Habsburgs, the Holy Roman Empire. So there's a weird thing. And a lot of Protestants were the same as Scotland. They were all rounded up by the Catholics and sent on these slave ships and so on and so forth. And that's why, to this day, the main contact between Calvinists in the world are between Hungarians and Scottish. All our kids go over there for summer school. And a lot of the Hungarians come over to Scotland. So there's a 400 year bond between us there. So I really liked Hungary, and I was seriously considering relocating with all my family, all my children, all my grandchildren. We were all going to go to a place called Vats, which is about 10 miles north of Budapest. Beautiful town, beautiful town. And we thought, right, we're just going to bail out and go there and live there and see what we can do. But then I was flung out the country.
What's the main objectives of Knights Templars International?
It's to bring people back to God. Because, as I say, if every single Muslim left or was kicked out of Britain or Europe tomorrow, what difference does it make? The abortion's still there, the sexual immorality's still there, the behaviour of women, the effeminate men, all of that, and the trans and all the nonsense under the sun and the liberal decadence and degeneracy, it's all there. Muslims leaving would not make a blind bit of difference. In fact, if you don't have something to bind your community together, it might make matters worse, because they could become, believe it or not, even more decadent, even more crazy. Look at America; they don't have what they would call a Muslim problem that we would perceive. You can go to strip clubs and you go to the Midwest, even a simple little tiny village is a strip club. You imagine trying to open a strip club in this town. Wouldn't happen, wouldn't fly. It'd be burnt to the ground in 24 hours. So our job is to stop, and we've wrote books. We've got 3 books written, as you know: the Reconquista of the West, the Great Replacement, and the Reconquista of the West is not a
Reconquista, very interesting.
Yeah, of course, but it's not a Reconquista in the physical sense. The Reconquista is the Reconquista of the West, Reconquista of the godless Westerners. Our people need to be reconquered for Christ.
So just to clarify, when you say Reconquista,
yeah,
to the Muslim, that's the Inquisition.
Of course.
That's being exterminated, driven away after being there for 800 years.
You're talking to a Protestant. We were subject to the Inquisition as well. We know all about it. Yeah. No, the Reconquista is the taking back of Europe through taking back our people. Forget you guys. For now. Forget you guys. We need to reconquer our people.
And then?
Well, there'll be half the troubles. you would find to be half the troubles. Because, for example, if you had Christian countries, if Germany and France and England and whatnot were Christian countries again, first of all, you'd be doing no abortions, so we wouldn't need. And the thing is, capitalist society, these people coming in, there's nothing going to stop it. We need them in because our population is dropping at such an alarming rate. And I don't think people understand this. People are saying there'll never be a Muslim majority in this country. Yes, there will, because what people don't understand is there are these are real figures. There's 500,000 English people die every year. White English die every year. There's only 300,000.
Very elderly population.
Yeah, very elderly. So there's 200,000 lost straight away. There's another 300,000 leave every year. That's 500,000 English disappearing every year. 500,000. In 10 years, it's 5 million. At the same time, there's about 1.2 to 1.5 foreigners coming in. So there's a demographic change of roughly 2 million per year. 20 years, that's 40 million.
What makes you think the foreigners are Muslims, though?
No, they're not necessarily Muslims.
There's a lot of Indian Hindus now.
Indian Hindus, of course. Yeah. And Mr. Robinson now, Tommy Robinson is saying we should bring the Hindus in, bring them into Egypt and all, bring them into Israel. Yeah. So, yes, of course. But the reality is, Britain is going to lose its so-called white indigenous majority very, very soon. Probably within 40 years, without a doubt. And if you look at Muslims taking over, you don't have to be a majority. If you've got the majority of under 30-year-olds, you're in control. Simple as that. And that's not far away. And people say, well, what do we do about it? Well, here, I'm going to tell you, there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing you can do about it. They're not going to leave. You can't kick them out. We tried it. The Irish have been trying to get rid of us for 800 years. We've been trying to get rid of them for 400 years. We can't get rid of each other. We're just having bloodbath and killing each other and misery and death. Now we've reached that kind of thing. You live there, we live there. That might happen in England. I think it will happen. I think there'll be areas where these people live and these people live. But the English won't survive unless they have religion, unless they have God, unless they have Jesus Christ, the faith of our fathers. Unless they have that, the whole thing is pointless. Germany's pointless. France is pointless. Holland's pointless. Unless our people get back to God, it's all pointless. So the Reconquista is primarily bringing Europe back to our Christian roots. The reason all this bad stuff's happening, it's not because of what the Muslims are doing. It's not because of what the black people are doing. It's not because even what the Jews are doing, although they're a lot responsible for the other things. The main reason is our people have turned their back on God, and God has lifted his hand from our nations. He's just lifted his hand off us. After blessing us for all these years, he's lifted his hand off us. And look at the chaos. So the first thing, the Templars, what we promote is getting people back to the faith. The people in the EDL, the people in the NF, the people in the neo-Nazi gangs, the people in the white supremacist gangs, they need to stop all this. It just needs to stop. It's silly, it's counterproductive, it doesn't work, and it's ungodly and it's unrighteous. You need to put all that time and energy, instead of marching in marches and going down to Dover to stop the boat people. There's only a few hundred of them coming in anyway. Instead of all of that, learn your faith, go to church, get married, have 7 and 8 children, keep your wife in the house as a good housewife. She won't want to leave. If you're a good husband, she's got a good family, she won't want to leave and go out amongst other people and strange men and then have an affair and disappear.
By default, they want security and stability.
That's all women want. That's why they're converting to Islam.
Security and stability.
And if you look at most men nowadays, it's not a lot of the men's fault. A lot of them have been, society has made them emasculated because they don't have Christianity. They fall for it. And now we've got this incel culture, like Mark Collett and people who run patriotic alternative. They're all hate-filled against women. How can you... Look, if we hate women, there's no future for us. And they don't want children, they want money, they want wealth. I can tell you, I've got a big family, and I can tell you there's times I've sat with no heating oil. Times I've sat in the winter. I've made a lot of money in my life, but whenever I make money, I give it away. I'm not trying to be pious, but I put it into something I believe in, whether it be the bands, the culture, the lodge, my tribal stuff. Even the Templars have put quite a lot of money into that as well.
Are you guys Freemasons?
No, we don't allow Masons to join.
So where does this thing that my Templars are Freemasons?
Because inside the Templars, there is a branch of... the Templars can be Muslim, Hindu, Jew. You can all join the Masons. Did you know that?
Yeah, no, the Masons, I don't know.
Yeah, you can join that. But there's a Christian sect in the Masons, and the Christian sect within the Masons is called the Knights Templar.
Okay.
Don't know why. The same in the Orange. There's a thing in the Orange Lodge called the Black Preceptory. And within that, there's also a thing called the Knights Templar.
Does the Knights Templars International accept Freemasons?
No. No, on the front page of the website, not allowed. We don't accept Masons. No. You must be a well, be careful how we call it. You've got to be a regenerate, born again, converted, whatever, Christian. You've got to be a serious, committed Christian. And
Kind of black mind, Joy.
oh, yeah, we have black people, lots of them. We've got lots of black people in America, in Africa, loads of them. Don't think we've got any in England, but we have black. We don't have any colour bar. And it say again, front page, we have no colour bar. You can be any colour you want, and you must be loyal to your own country. You know, it's not an internationalist thing; it's a nationalist thing, of course.
Oh, so it's not pan-Christian.
No, you must be loyal to your own particular country. That's you. That's where your loyalties lie, is with your nation, and that transcends having a bad government. So if you're an American, you must be loyal to America, even though Joe Biden's in and he's a lunatic, and the Democrats are in. Doesn't matter. God gave you that nation, so it's up to you to fight to make that nation better, not just to turn your back on it. So yeah, we've got lots of black people, we've got Chinese people, we've got all sorts of people and people were here during the summer, because obviously Northern Ireland is very monocultural, not a lot of brown faces about. We had brown faces, black faces wandering about out there, and people were more shocked to them than us with capes on. People were like, a woman stopped us and said, hold on, how can you be the Ku Klux Klan? He's black. I says, well, you've answered your own question. We're not the Ku Klux Klan. Just because we wear white capes, Spanish Catholics wear them and the big pointy hats. We're not. And this amazed people. It said, but you've got white capes on. You're obviously something to do with the Klan, and you've got black people. No, the guy is from New Orleans. He's an ex-policeman. He's 6'5". He's black as your boots. But he's one of us.
Let's say all the various right-wing factions, whether they're neo-Nazis, white supremacists, all the variations and spectrums and stripes and flavors. Just hypothetically speaking, imagine they all do turn back to Christianity, the type of Christianity that you'd like to see. Imagine they do everything that you want them to do. Become better husbands, better men, disciplined, committed to God, committed to their faith and all that. So imagine they fulfill all of those things. Let's just say you even get a man similar to this into power. What then happens to the Muslims?
I think in Britain, and I'm going to be very honest, I think, how do you get rid of 5 million people? There's about 5 million Muslims in Britain now.
What does your ideal Britain look like?
Completely and absolutely like me. Indigenous British people. Now, don't get me wrong, we've always lived in a society where there's people coming to work, there's people coming to do stuff, and people are welcome to come here and work as long as they go home again. Like you said, your grandfather or something came here to work, fine, 100%. And, you know, fought in the war, helped us rebuild the country, and like a man, absolutely no problem in that. But there comes a point where you have to go home. You just have to go home. So maybe we should have been giving out 7-year permits, work permits or something.
Why can't we stay for 250, 300 years like the Brits did in our lands?
Because eventually you kicked us out, and rightly so. And look at the damage that was done in the meantime.
So give us a couple of hundred more years, innit?
No, I don't think so. I think you'd be much happier. But I don't believe in, homicidal stuff. I think the situations, and let's be honest, if the Western powers stopped bombing and attacking Muslim lands, there wouldn't be so many Muslims here.
That's for sure.
Most of the people coming in, running up the beaches in Kent are from Afghanistan. I wonder why. The Russians had to go at them. Then the Americans and the Brits had to go at them. These people have been years. I had a great uncle who was killed in Afghanistan in 1938 in the northwest frontier, Khyber Pass. Killed there in the Scottish Reds with the Black Watch fighting with them. So it's just been a constant nonsense. So if we mind our own business, and I think if we managed to do all those wonderful things you said there, and everybody became a Christian, and with a Christian government, we wouldn't be in your lands. We wouldn't be anywhere near your lands. We wouldn't be near them. It's as simple as that.
How else has Christianity spread around the world then?
It spreads through the word. You can send preachers out. It doesn't mean, a preacher going to a country to spread the word, or, a couple of evangelists, that's fine. But it doesn't mean to say we need to plant 5 million white British people in Pakistan. That's ludicrous. That's only going to end up one way. Conflict. And that's what worries me, because I've seen it in Northern Ireland. And it worries me in case conflict does break out, because I'll tell you what's happening in Britain now. And you might find this unfair, but it's true, because I've seen it. I've seen the police stations in West Yorkshire. And if you go up the Falls Road today, and you go to places like Woodburn Police Station, which is up by Suffolk, a little Protestant enclave, right in the heartland of the Falls, a little Protestant. And they can only live there because there's a big police station. They're the same design that's getting built in Batley. They're the same design as the police stations now in Bradford. They're the exact same designs. They're semi-military design. So they know what's coming. These are police stations. They're not police stations. You'll see the exact same ones built here. It must be the same contractors. They're built with a kind of sloping thing in like this.
Not prisons.
Yeah, it's a military base and slits and holes where one day there'll be a machine gun pointed. They know what's coming. Because I've been in Bradford. Where there's been bad behaviour from some of the gangsters. You have gangsters the same as we have gangsters, bad people, criminal elements. And the police are terrified. Terrified of them. The abuse I've seen the police taking in Bradford is unbelievable. People spitting on them, kicking their car, laughing at them. The police have just sat there doing nothing. Terrified. There's only a matter of time before the British police, probably through some of the Zionist lobby groups, actually say, that's not happening anymore. And the minute that happens, there could be serious conflict. Now, what happened here in the 1960s is the Irish rose up, and the reason there was a war is because my people, we stood against them and said, don't think so. They got armed, we got armed, and we attacked each other. The army and the police and the state were irrelevant to this argument.
But they would say they'd be on your side.
Well, I've never been on my side, because I tell you, I've never seen any evidence. I know they keep going on about collusion, load of nonsense. The police came from these communities, and they knew us, and they arrested us at a rate of 3 to 1 compared to them. So it's nonsense. But they're irrelevant. What happens when with communal... I don't know in England if there will be communal violence, because I don't see where it would come from England. We're a tight community, militaristic. I don't know how the English would defend themselves if the Muslim community did kick off. So I don't even think that would happen. But if it did happen, the ramifications of that, and I do think the Muslim community will rise up at some point, very quickly. Maybe not even the Muslims, as in religious Muslims. I'm talking about the gangster elements, which are very strong. Even in Glasgow, there's big gangs of Muslim gangsters. They're the people who will provoke us. But the trouble is, when you take the lid off Pandora's box, as we found here in Ireland, when you take that lid off, you've got definitely a job putting it back on. It took us 30 years to get the lid on, and thousands of people dead, tens of thousands injured, cities ruined, lives ruined. So we need to, and the Templars' job is not to rabble rouse. The Templars' job is to speak sense to these neo-Nazis, to these white power supremacist crackpots. Have you ever noticed people who support white supremacy, and they're normally skinny, dying looking runts?
They're not very educated either.
They're not very educated. Well, the worrying thing is there's a new generation, like say the Mark Collett people. They're very educated, they're college incels.
So what do you think of Nick Fuentes?
Well, I think he's gay.
Okay.
I don't like him.
Okay.
Can't stand him. And all that turning point, I seen Father Calvin Robertson the other day turning up there. I used to like that guy. I went right off him. He's standing 1 week with Tommy
The
Robinson.
mixed race gentleman with the afro.
Yeah. He's standing 1 week with Tommy Robinson.
He projects so much insecurity on Twitter.
Craziness. Well, I've spoke to him personally. I've sent him a message.
Take it out with your own community. Why are you venting arse for?
And I've said to him, what are you doing? You're meant to be a man of God. If you're a man of God and you've been ordained and all the rest of it, you're supposed to have a thing called discernment. And you're standing with Tommy Robinson. And you're standing with Turning Point USA. It's a Zionist think tank. That's all it is. What are you doing? You shouldn't be doing this. But he's went from being Church of England to high church, low church, Anglican, Catholic. So.
Oh, is he Catholic now?
He's Catholic now.
When did he become Catholic?
A couple of weeks ago. I know, it's bonkers.
My days.
Exactly. It's craziness. So I went right off him and all of these people. But our job as Templars is not to cause trouble. Our job is to try. And we do this. And by the way, not at insignificant personal risk. We go amongst the naughty people, the naughty men and boys and violent people, and say to them, this is not the way. This white supremacy ain't the way. This crazy pagan, this neo-pagan that the Nordic people are into, we've been there. Well, I've been to Sweden, and with quite success there. So we turned a neo-pagan, Nazi, horrible gang over there into what they call now, there's a big thing sweeping the Nazis now, it's called Christian identity. It's not ideal. It's a halfway house. It's when people move away from Nietzschean, Nazi, white power, paganism, they move into a thing called Christian identity, where they identify with the Christian ethos of their people. So it's a halfway house. It's a journey. It's a journey. They're on a journey. They're going from neo-Nazi, full-blown paganism, into Christian identity. And now, 10 years later, some are moving over to full-blown Christianity. And I can tell you, I've seen it in Hungary, I've seen it in Sweden, and I've seen it in Norway, and I've seen it in Finland. So a lot of those neo-Nazi gangs that have been familiar to me in the 70s and 80s, a lot of them are on that journey. But praise God, they're on that journey. And the journey's a good journey because they suddenly lose their obsession with everybody else. Because, listen, it's very easy. The easiest thing is to blame everybody else for our problems. The problem starts with you. Look in the mirror in the morning, and we've got a great picture of the Templars. It's a guy on the drink, no shaved, and he's looking in the mirror, and what's looking back at him is a Templar. Because that's what you could be. You could be an upstanding Christian warrior. Now, that doesn't mean you need to wield a sword. What is a warrior? A warrior. Yet. But a warrior is fighting.
So when?
No, but you're fighting corruption. You're fighting addiction. You're fighting society. You're fighting the system. Your battle is every day. You know, Paul talks about fighting the good fight, running the race. Nowhere in Christianity does it say winning the race. You need to run the race to the very end to receive your prize. So a warrior is a warrior. Most of the times you won't be physically fighting. But I can see a day when Christians do have to fight. Now, will we necessarily fighting Muslims? I don't think so. I think it could be. Really? I think we'll be fighting the liberals. I think we'll be fighting the left. I think we'll be fighting the communists before we're fighting you.
2 questions. I don't want to wrap up. What would you say to those who would say, nice spiel from Jim, it's all good and well him trying to reform and bring people back to Christianity. But what he's actually doing is he's actually playing the long game. He's organising this unorganised bunch. He's trying to bring them back to Christianity for an eventual war, for an eventual showdown.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, because I do think it's inevitable there'll be a war in Europe. As I say, I don't think it's going to be the initial war. Let's be very honest, I don't think the initial war will be against Jews. I think that will come at some point. I think the initial war will be against the mad lefties like Antifa and the communists and these crazy people.
So another European civil war?
Without a doubt, that's what we do. That's what we do.
Because that's a European thing, that is.
It's a thing, of course it is.
Why?
Crazy. I don't know why. I don't know, who knows? But that is inevitable. And I do think people need to be organised. And one of the reasons we do, these Templar flags that you see here are very, very prized things. So if we go to a militia, for example, the militia in Hungary I spoke about, they were coming from a neo-pagan, all that stuff. And we dealt with them for several years. And the leadership became Christians, serious Christians. We checked up with the ministers, the priests, they were serious people. They introduced Christianity into the movement. They jettisoned all the pagan nonsense. And eventually, they got a Templar flag. Because when the Civil War starts in Europe, as we always do, my wife and kids, my grandkids might be on the roads as refugees like we see in Gaza. How do they know that the militia they bump into, just because of the same colour, are a good militia? Because men of violence always take quick advantage of a situation.
Irrespective of faith.
Irrespective of any of that. So how do my people know that those guys with the guns, they're good guys? Because they'll be flying that Busan. That Busan will fly. It's the same with people in France. There's a militia in France, about 25,000 strong. But they were already very devout Catholics. They've all moved now to Nantes and that part of France. They're all rejecting France. Not just rejecting Muslims, they're rejecting multiculturalism, they're rejecting liberalisation. They're all building strong Catholic communities there. And they have a Busan flag. It's like a quality assured mark that you know if this militia's got that flag, they have been vetted. They're not bloodthirsty psychopathic maniacs. They're decent Christian men who will look after women and children. Not just Christian men and women and children. Not just that. I told you that example in London when the EDL boys attacked the Muslim family. We were the first people to intervene there. Because that's just not right, my friend. It's indecent. And it's the same with Gaza.
So what's your solution to Palestine?
It's too late now. Well, it's very difficult. The two-state solution could have worked. Cannot work now because...
Widely rejected.
Well, not only that, Israel's flooded the West Bank with 1 million illegal settlers. So there has to be some kind of intervention there. There has to be. But it would need to be a world intervention, and it's got to be America and Russia and China, because everybody else is just play acting. But it's never going to happen now. So I don't know. I don't have the answer now to the Palestinian question, because what do we do? If we were powerful like the old days and Israel was weak, we could just say, we're telling you, we're drawing a line from Haifa or whatever, Jaffa, we're drawing a line across there. Everyone south is theirs.
So you do believe in imperialism?
To a certain extent.
You do believe in divide and rule?
To a certain extent, I think it's...
How about bringing back these Zionist European Jews and let them settle back to where they originally came from?
Please, God, no.
But that's where they come from. They came from Germany and Poland and Russia.
I know that.
And France.
I know that. Well, most of them come from Ukraine and Russia.
But they don't look like Arabs. They don't look. They don't really look Semitic.
They're not Semitic. That's
They're
when
that
somebody
blue
When
eyes.
somebody says to me, "You're
The
anti-Semitic,"
blue eyes,
why?
their fair, white skin,
They say to me,
blonde
"Well,
hair.
you're against Israel, so you're anti-Semitic." I says 80% of people who live in Israel are nothing to do with the people of the Bible. They're not a Semitic people. And by the way, Arabs are Semitic.
Yes.
They're not Semitic. They're Khazars. They're Europeans. I mean, like Woody Allen, you know the ones in
Yeah.
Brooklyn. They've got the pasty face, the blue eyes, myopic. They all wear glasses. They have not a drop of Abrahamic blood in them. Not at all. The Arabs have got Abrahamic blood in them. These people don't. So, yeah, let's put them all in Ukraine.
Last question.
They did think about going there, you know, at
They
one
did.
point.
They did.
Well, Ukraine's going to be so depopulated now with this wretched war. Ukraine might be a big empty space for them. I would sign up for that.
May help with finances as well.
Me help to find. I would sign up for that. Let's move Israel to Ukraine.
Final question. What's the future of Muslim-Christian relations?
I don't think they're good because there's outside players there, mainly Israel and their agents and the Mossad and the Likud and these kind of agencies, where it's in their interests. I mean, who do you think's created EDL?
Various elements, but definitely the Zionist lobby has a hand to play in that.
Wasn't elements, it was them. I know the guy who originally started EDL. He's a devout Christian who lives in Malta now. And he was strong-armed out by certain people, Mr. Robinson being one of them. And the money came from bankers in the City of London. I've met them. They tried to bribe me. I remember and we never covered that. I was offered £300,000 by a well-known European
The same guy that
parliamentarian.
offered Nick money as well.
No, totally different. And this was the Britain First days. They offered me 300 grand. And I said, well, what do I need to do? And they said, well, it's not what you need to do. It's what you don't criticise Israel, promote a more LGBT tolerant thing. I said,
Bash Muslims.
no, just, not bash them physically, but that's it. Muslims are the main threat. Muslims are the only threat. Blah, blah,
Muslims,
blah.
LGBT Israel. Muslims,
Attack
attack Muslims, pro-LGBT,
Yep.
support Israel.
Yeah, that's it. And I said, well, if I'd done that, I'd be rendered mute. I wouldn't be able to speak about anything. But I'm not up for sale. I'm a slave. I am a bond servant of Christ Jesus. There's no money ever printed in the world that would induce me to do that. I'm not doing it. So, but twice they came to me with that money. So that's the same people who started the EDL. And Nick Griffin done a book on it in 2009 saying this is all a plot.
Yeah.
So the relationship between Muslims and Christians is going to be very fraught. And that's why I agreed to this. Because there has to be channels open. Because these people are going to do everything within their powers to create the state where there's tension. And that's one of the reasons I left Britain First, because I could see this thing I'd created was being used in the wrong purposes. It was being used purely as an anti-Muslim thing. And I would say Muslims are one problem. Abortion is a far bigger problem. But, I mean, the Muslims, maybe with the bombs, this country they've killed 30 or 40. The Irish killed hundreds in England. But we kill 200 a day in abortion. So these are big issues. Why are we focusing on the mosques when there's abortion clinics open up in your town? But you're not outside there. I am. You're not. You're outside the mosque protesting. No more mosques. What about no more abortion clinics? So I think we have to be very careful, because I think the powers that be, those who would profit most of divide and conquer, they will still support the useful idiots, the Tommies of this world, the Britain Firsts of this world, all these, these myriad of wee sort of satellite groups all about, stop the mosques and stop the boats invasion, stop Sharia law, stop halal. They're being funded and heavily funded, because you don't need. I know one guy, for example, recently he's on the internet all the time. He's always down at Dover protesting. I know for a fact he's been given a few quid, but he's getting like 200 quid a week. 200 quid a week. All of a sudden he started with all this white power language now. I've known this guy for years. There's not a bit of white nationalism or white stuff in him, ever. But he started with this now. Why? Does he believe it? Not a bit yet. But he's been told to say this because it draws in all these nutters. It draws all them to him. And you watch, he's not saying it yet, but you mark my words, he'll start with the anti-Muslim stuff, the pro-Israel stuff. I guarantee you within 3 months this starts. Because this lobby is huge. This lobby is massive. And they've lost a lot of ground now because of the bad behaviour in Gaza. So they're going to double their efforts in the next few months to try and keep the focus on Islam in this country. Islam, in my opinion, is a huge problem for this country. It's a massive problem for my people. But it's not the biggest problem. It's not the problem. I would say homosexuality. decadence, women be running about like whores, weak and effeminate men, and abortion, and atheism, liberalism, whatever you want to call it. These are the problems that if I've had a magic wand tomorrow and I could either cure all of them or get rid of all the Muslims, I'm going to cure them. You guys will be here for a while yet.
Kim,
But then you need to go.
we need our caliphate before we go.
Listen, that's the thing. You need a proper caliphate.
We need somewhere safe, secure, stable, independent, autonomous for us to want to move there.
I agree with you. And I think we mentioned the Serbian thing because I was very involved in Serbia.
Yes, of course.
I was very involved in the Serbian
Did you support
Kosovo.
Did you arm the Serbs to kill my Albanian brothers?
Definitely not. Again, Templars, we only believe nowadays in defensive actions. We supplied, because the Americans have cut off the satellite comms to the Serbs, so they can only operate with these Russian tuned in satellite. I don't know how it works, but they can only tune into Russian things now.
Do you provide weapons?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely no way. That's offensive. No. And in the video the BBC showed to try and black my character, I said, look, we don't need Kalashnikovs. They'll come later, which they always do. But there's no my job to provide them or even encourage them. And the place is bristling with arms. Are you joking? That place has got more guns than anything else. Mm-hmm. We supplied bulletproof vests because a lot of the Christian farmers there, whether we like it or not, have been taken out because, sadly, Kosovo is a narco state because the Americans just wanted their big base there, you know, the Bondsteel base there. They wanted a NATO base there. So they're allowing the gangsters to do what they want. Most of the heroin and drugs that come into Europe come from Albania. If you drive through Albania, and I was all through it, the mansions, unbelievable. Ugly things, but big mansions. And what I've seen there, you won't believe this, so I tell you this. Mosques with American flags flying from them. Banners across the mosque. We love America.
Kosovo also recognised Israel.
There you go. Kosovo, Muslim, exactly. It's a joke. And the biggest, we were given comms equipment because some of these Christian farmers were being shot in the fields and there's no communication.
But the Serbs still use the whole racial, religious...
I know that. But, you know, we try and use influence where we can. And we've seen a lot of that in northern Mitrovica. We were there on election day and there were firing machine guns across the bridge, each other, and banter, friendly banter. But that whole situation is mad. It reminded me of Belfast so much, you know. But that whole situation has been manufactured completely by Western powers. So they've got the Bondsteel base in Kosovo and the whole ethnic cleansing, and it's an ugly place. Look, the Balkans is a crazy place. During the Second World War, the Croat Catholics cut the throats of 850,000 Serb men, women and children. So it's a brutal place, and the Serbs and the Hungarians fighting each other in the north of the country were loading each other's kids into brick kilns, you know, brick ovens to make bricks, baking each other's kids. It's a different world there. So we certainly didn't want to add to that, but we went down there. The main work we did was restoration work to monasteries that had been damaged. We put a lot of money into the restoration of monasteries. We supplied bulletproof vests, and we supplied, what do you call these things, satellite communications devices. And there's no need for military equipment or weapons as such. They've got enough of all that. But we do take a strong stand with the northern Kosovo Serbs because they have been given a raw deal. And the other day when there was an incursion, I don't know if you've seen it a few weeks ago, there was an incursion into a Serbian village, and they said by the you know, and of course the Muslim KL forces, whatever they are. It wasn't. That was American Navy SEALs. That was American Special Forces. And they shot dead 4 Serbs. That was American Special Forces. So this is going on a daily basis. The biggest problem for the Serbs is not the Albanians, the Kosovans, or the Muslims. The biggest problem for the Serbs is the US of A and NATO. That's the biggest problem. I've been there. I've seen the bomb buildings where NATO bombed a Christian country. Can you imagine it? That's the biggest problem. So we don't believe in offensive action. We don't believe in ethnic cleansing. We don't believe in any of that. But we will help our Christian brothers when they're under pressure and they're being killed, whether they've been killed by the Muslims, whether they've been killed by the drug gangs, whether they've been killed by NATO or American Special Forces or the SAS, because they operate still, you know, in Kosovo. We will always try our best to save the lives of our fellow Christian brothers, and we apologise to nobody for that.
And I guess you'd probably say the same when we say we would support our Muslim brothers in any shape or form.
Of course, we should. This is what we should all be doing. Exactly, and we should be honest about it, and not go bitching and whinging and moaning when things don't go our way. But we must be careful not to encourage violence, because let me tell you, as a Christian and as a minister, we don't need to encourage violence. There's enough violence. There's too much violence. Our job, if we're righteous people before God, our first priority, it doesn't matter how angry we get, and we can get very angry, I get very angry, we must curtail that, and we must try and use our influence to bring the violence down. Sometimes there's got to be war.
Preservation of life.
Preservation of life. But, you know, if war comes, it comes, but it should be the absolutely last resort where people have done everything and then some to stop it. But if war comes, you must fight a righteous war. And that's what we need to strive for. Gaza, that is not a righteous war. That's a genocide. That's a Holocaust. And that's what all of us need to keep in mind. If war comes and Europe, which is the longest in history, but we went without a big war, it's coming again. So we need to make sure if there is a war, it's fought on very strict grounds as much as you can. Preservation of life, protection of the innocent, protection of the children, protection of the women. And if we can fight a war like that, well, you fight it. If you can't fight a war like that, don't fight it. It's not worth it. It's not worth losing your soul for killing other human beings because you don't like them or they've upset you. And one of our main things is we don't fight anybody. We shouldn't fight anybody because you hate those in front of you. You should only fight the men in front of you because you love the people behind you who you're protecting. And that's it. There is no excuse for offensive wars nowadays, I believe. Defensive wars, what can you do? If the enemy comes to you, you have to defend yourself because there's people behind you. But we have no business going on the offensive against people. We live in a very sophisticated world now. There is no real need for those offensive wars. And look what they've done. Look what the West has done with all the offensive wars we've done. We've caused chaos across the world. And then we bitch and moan because millions of these people that we've displaced bitch up in our countries. Most of the immigrants here right now wouldn't be here if we hadn't have bombed Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. They wouldn't be here. So, and Syria, what do you call that? Libya. We need to get this through our heads. It's not the British people that's doing it. It's not the American people that's doing it. It's our corrupt, horrible, profit-driven, industrial complex, share-owning elites. They're the people doing it. And if we keep voting them in, we then are culpable. They're doing because we've allowed them to do it. So we need to wake up. And I would say before people start bitching and moaning about Muslims or anybody else, Hindus or blacks or anything, let's get our own house in order.
Jim.
Let's get our own house in order.
Jim, I think that's a good note to conclude today's podcast. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for inviting me to your home.
No problem.
For hosting me in Belfast. Truly honoured.
You're welcome. Anytime. Thank you.
Jim. Brothers and sisters and friends and foes, I hope you enjoyed today's extensive podcast as much as I did in terms of exchanging ideas, airing differences, exploring areas of agreement. I hope you all leave a comment, your thoughts. Still undecided as to which platform this podcast will go out in, but I will keep you all posted. Do remember to click subscribe to the Five Pillars YouTube channel, and you can find this show on all 3 seasons on all the major audio platforms. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.